that number of 3, and it basically creates distortions in the Electoral College where certain states generally should have more Electoral College votes than they actually have, but because the floor is 3, a bunch of states should have less than 3, but they get their 3. So the way you collect these Electoral College votes is you get them by winning the vote in a state. So, for example, Donald Trump right now leading in Indiana. I'd expect him to win in Indiana. That means he would get the 11 Electoral College votes from Indiana. That begins his path to 270. The reason why you get this kind of distortion compared to, say, a Canadian or a UK or an Indian election is because what happens is not every state is equally as competitive, right? Indiana and Kentucky, Trump is going to win those by hundreds of thousands of votes, and those votes are functionally wasted because once you win the popular vote in a state, you get the Electoral College votes. It doesn't matter if you win it by 1 vote or 1,000,000 votes, you still get all the Electoral College votes. And what happens is if you have narrow wins in key states, such as Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, like Donald Trump was able to do in 2016, you win all of the Electoral College votes by only winning those states by a couple hundred thousand, like 100,000 votes in some cases. And that doesn't help you win the popular vote, but winning bigger states and getting more votes does. So that's why Democrats have won the popular vote in every election since 2000, with the exception of 2004. So this is Donald Trump's 3rd time running in a presidential election. He will likely lose the popular vote for 3 straight presidential elections, but he has been very competitive in all of them because of the Electoral College.
Great. And you know what, at this point, I think we'll also like to talk about the issues. I know there were many domestic issues. We'll talk about the foreign policy as well. What are the other issues? But Robert, what do you think are the issues that are being discussed in this election?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the most important issue in this election, just hands down, is inflation, right? And inflation and cost of living. We see this in Canada. I was there in studio with you just a couple of weeks ago covering the BC election, and that was very clearly the biggest important issue in that election. And we see the same thing here tonight. We see inflation and the economy is generally one of the most important issues. That being said, though, the exit polls that we've seen a little bit, they actually have protect democracy as one of the most important issues, and abortion. Those obviously are not as important in Canada. Abortion has long been settled in Canada, but it's become an issue in the U.S. since the basically removal of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court. And obviously there have been issues with democracy, specifically on Donald Trump's side with January 6th. So those are kind of the issues people are voting on, and I think we're gonna. Those are the things we talk about tonight. So I think the more people care about, say, the economy and inflation, those are generally issues Donald Trump does better on. So those voters are tending to break towards Donald Trump. But if your biggest concern is generally democracy and abortion, those are generally voters that are turning out for Democrats and Harris. So that's roughly what we're looking at in terms of that. And I think those issues are going to define this election. But at this moment, and again, it is early, it is very early, but this election looks, the battle lines look very, very similar to 2020 at this point. But at this point, Harris is just doing about a point or two better. But basically everything is still looking about like 2020.
That's quite interesting to know. Everything is looking exactly like 2020. Yes, we'll talk about that. What happened in 2016, what happened in 2020, what happened in 2012. And we also want to, at this point, talk about what's the concept of swing states. We'll talk about that. But I want to talk a little bit more about the issues here. You spoke inflation is important. Can we talk a little bit more? We will have a few other guests joining us. We'll talk about economy, we'll talk about inflation, and there are hosts of other issues that we will be talking about. But can you talk a little bit more about why inflation is that important, housing, economy, jobs, why all these pocketbook issues are very important?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger thing in this election with the U.S. is that a lot of people. I mean, Donald Trump was the president from 2017 through to 2021, and then you got this massive spike in inflation in later in 2021 when after January when Donald Trump was no longer president, and through 2020, 2023, 2024. So when you see prices have skyrocketed like that, Biden got a lot of the blame for that, and a lot of people have mentioned, and we see this in the polling, that people say things were cheaper when Donald Trump was president. Therefore, if we elect him again, the price of everything will go down. The price of housing will go down. Rent will go down, and just things you buy at the grocery store, right? Like that bag of chips you buy is going to come down in price. The chocolate bar, the loaf of bread, and the price of gas. They say that if you elect Donald Trump, he will lower the prices on those things. And that has been one of the central arguments in this campaign in terms of inflation. And we see it in Canada too, although it's a lot more in terms of housing. But in the US, it's really crystallized itself in the fact that, because in Canada, we obviously have Trudeau. Trudeau's been prime minister since 2015. He was in power before the wave of inflation happened and through it. But when you have this kind of very sharp cleave between when Trump was president, there was very low inflation, and then all of a sudden Biden was president, and then there was all this inflation. A lot of people attribute that to the Democrats. Now, that's not necessarily fair. Inflation was a global phenomenon. There's a lot of reasons why it happened. It's not Joe Biden didn't just press a button and start increasing the price of gas. But that's what a lot of voters kind of think. They think this was a Democratic issue. The Democrats caused this, and therefore they need to go back and elect Trump to fix that issue, right? So I think that's fundamentally why the inflation issue is so prevalent there. I would say that in the U.S., food inflation has actually been worse than in Canada, but rental inflation has not been as bad in the U.S. as it has been in Canada. So take your pick of which one you'd rather have. Would you rather have groceries more expensive? Or would you have more expensive rent? It doesn't really matter much, to be fair. So I think it's a similar issue in Canada, but I think in the U.S. it appears a lot more as economy, things are too expensive, but in Canada it appears more in housing. But again, it's functionally the same issue. It's inflation and it's the price of things that people need to live increasing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Inflation has always been one of the key issues wherever in the world, whether it's any country in Europe, in India, Pakistan, our elections in US, Canada. And you're mentioning inflation is even more important. I know inflation is very important, but you just mentioned inflation is even more important in the US than in Canada. We'll talk about that, but why don't we quickly move on to the swing states? Just for viewers' benefit, we'd like to tell you most of the states either vote Republican or because this is a winner take all. It's not like the popular vote. It's not like England, India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. It's not like you elect the MPs and then I'm giving you a quick example before we get onto the swing states. Say, for instance, in India, it's Uttar Pradesh. UP has 80 member parliaments from one single state. So not necessarily all the MPs would be from the same party, but here it's winner take all. The entire state is taken over. That's how you count the delegates here. So that's why if one state turns blue or red, I mean, if it's a Democrat or Republican, it's winner take all. All the delegates are given to that particular candidate. And the interesting part is that, yes, most of the states, they have traditionally either supported Republicans or the Democrats. But then we have certain states who flip. Even if a state has slipped once or twice or three times, we usually call them as swing states. We'll talk about the swing states one by one. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona. These are your swing states. But what happens in these swing states? It's very interesting to watch how these swing states voted in 2012, 2008, 2004, in 2000, but very importantly, how these swing states voted in 2016, because that's the time Trump won, in 2020, because that's the time Trump lost. So, of course, it's very important how these swing states have voted in the last 15, 20, or 30 years, but the last two elections would be very, very important, and that will, I think, Robert, if I want to name one as the swing state and also the bellwether state, I want your opinion. Would you know that I would name Pennsylvania. I would name Pennsylvania as the swing state and also the bellwether state. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I would want to call Pennsylvania as a swing state and the bellwether state. And if you would ask me a very important state, I would say Pennsylvania. And I'm really obviously I'm looking at all other states from California to Texas to all the big states. I'm obviously following the swing states, but if I'm really keeping my eye on one single state, that would be Pennsylvania. I want your take on the swing states. How did they behave? And I'll be apologies for interrupting in the middle, because just for the viewers' benefit, I'll be throwing in lots of question in the middle. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%, and I completely agree with you.
Oh, you agree with me?
Yeah,
For,
Pennsylvania is 100%
for
the definitive
Pennsylvania,
swing state.
okay.
Yes, yes, 100% Pennsylvania. I will say that in our final poll, we did have Harris up 2 in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So again, still a very important swing state, but slightly higher. We actually had her up less in Wisconsin. But no, I would say definitively Pennsylvania is the swing state. I'm fairly sure that whoever wins Pennsylvania will win the election. If the winner of Pennsylvania didn't win the election, I would be very shocked. I'd be very surprised in that case. The 3 Rust Belt states, we call them the Rust Belt states, the Blue Wall, because they're actually they have a long history of industrial production. They actually border us up in Canada, right? Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. They're right there. A lot of them bordering just southern Ontario. Those states are very similar demographically. They're very white. They have in some of the larger cities, specifically Milwaukee and Detroit and Philadelphia, they have some African American population and a little bit of Hispanic population in Pennsylvania, but largely they are very white and dominated by white voters, and specifically white non-college voters. When you think of white non-college voters in those states, and we have similar ones in southern Ontario, they think of those as old factory workers. Those are people who basically either finished high school or didn't finish high school, immediately walked off, got a job at a factory, and 20, 30 years ago, that was good. That was perfectly fine to be able to raise a family, but that's no longer the case. A lot of those people have lost their jobs. They've had to go work in other places. So that's kind of your prototypical white non-college Midwestern voter. Now, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are fascinating because they have voted together. So they've been all won by the same candidate in every election since 1988. The last time they split was Michael Dukakis won actually Wisconsin, and then George H.W. Bush won Michigan and Pennsylvania. That's the level of how similar these states usually vote. Now, there's been a couple of really close calls. In 2004, George W. Bush almost won Wisconsin, but Michigan and Pennsylvania still voted blue. And generally, these states have been pretty blue, Democratic leaning in recent years, including 2008, 2012, but 2016 was when, and people mention it, the collapse of the blue wall. When all of a sudden Trump won all 3 of them very narrowly and was able to win the presidential election off of that. People thought there was no way he could win those 3 swing states. He did win all 3 of them, swept them, and that's what gave him the presidency for 4 years. In 2020, in the polling, they looked pretty safe for Joe Biden. Joe Biden was supposedly going to cruise to victory in all of them, but they were insanely tight. They were much, much tighter than expected. And as a result, he did win all of them. He won all of them, and then also Georgia and Arizona and Nevada. But it was expected that he was going to be pulling ahead of them a lot more. So those are your traditional swing states, and that's for those are your Midwestern ones. North Carolina is a little bit different. It's kind of had a different path in terms of becoming competitive. It was basically always a traditionally Republican state going back decades. But in 2008, Obama won it very narrowly. But that's the last time it's been won by a Democrat. Ever since then, it's been narrowly won by Republicans. Democrats were able to win the governor's race there in 2016, although Clinton lost it in 2016. But they haven't elected any Democratic senators, and no Democratic presidential candidate has won it. But the reason we're talking about it tonight is because during the pandemic, there's been a lot of migration into North Carolina, specifically into the suburbs of Raleigh. And that alone is potentially powering it because a lot of those migrants into North Carolina are expected to be Democrats. So it's kind of pushing that state more competitive. Georgia, another key swing state as well, just to the south of North Carolina. It's a traditionally Republican state, but in the last since the Trump era, Trump only won it by 5 points, and it has been rapidly zooming left since 2020, since 2016. Democrats made it competitive on the governor level in 2018, and there was two Senate elections. There was the regular and the special Senate election in 2020, and Biden was able to win it in 2020. Democrats won both runoff elections in 2020 as well, that's the only reason they even had the Senate in 2020 and 2022 was because they won those two runoffs. And basically, Republicans, since Donald Trump won in 2016 and the governor went in 2018, Republicans have won the governor in 2022 in Georgia. But since then, no Republicans have won any other statewide office, federal at least. They lost the presidency there in 2020. They lost the two Senate races in 2020, and they lost the Senate race in 2022 as well. Moving over to Arizona, a similar state in many cases to Georgia, demographically very, very different. But a similar story where it's a state that used to be solidly Republican. This was John McCain's home state. He was the presidential nominee in 2008. But one of Donald Trump's main things was basically picking fights with John McCain. So that state has been moving rapidly left, specifically due to Maricopa County. Obviously, Maricopa County, about 65% of the vote in Arizona. As that has moved left, the state itself has moved left rapidly, and that is causing it to be competitive. Basically, since 2020, when Joe Biden won it and the Democrats won the Senate race there, and Democrats also won the Senate race there in 2018, since 2020, basically Republicans have lost every statewide race in Arizona. They won the governor's race there in 2018, but they won the governor's race there in 2022. They won the Senate race there in 2022. And yeah, it's expected to go to Trump tonight, but if there was a surprise on the board, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Arizona. And then there's Nevada, a very, very close swing state, completely dominated by Clark County, which is Las Vegas, more well known as Las Vegas. Very, very close race. 2020, we were waiting on days for it. We were waiting on final mail-in ballots to come in just to clarify who won that. And it's expected to be very, very close tonight. Republicans won the governor's race there in 2022, but they did win. The Democrats held their Senate seat there in 2022 as well. So it's expected to be a very, very close race there tonight in Nevada. If we knew who won Nevada tonight, I would be very, very shocked. I do not think we will know. But again, it's going to be a very interesting state. And that state, because of those key 6 electoral college votes in Nevada, that can be kind of the final piece in winning the electoral college for a candidate.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining all that. As much as I agree your points on Arizona, Nevada, all those, but I'll stick that yes, I think for me, the swing state as well as the bellwether state would be Pennsylvania. And I know you agreed on Pennsylvania, but let's keep our eyes on Nevada and Arizona. And of course, but my pick out of all the states, the swing states, we all know they are important, but out of the swing states, I think Pennsylvania for me is one of the key. I'm definitely looking for that. I'll talk about Michigan as well. I'll talk about other swing states as well. Which way will North Carolina go? That's very important too. But we'll also talk, what is the path to victory? What is the path to victory for Kamala Harris? What is the path to victory for Donald Trump? And is it difficult for Kamala Harris? Is it difficult for Donald Trump? And there are so many other issues that we will be discussing at this point. We have Ramona Singh. She has been in US for quite some time now, and let's hear from her. She's been capturing a lot of ground reports from there. Ramona Singh, a very warm welcome on Ymedia. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks for joining, first of all. And I know you've been traveling across US in many different states. You've been covering elections. And I just want your take. what did you see at the ground in different states, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to be on Ymedia on Election Day in the United States. I want to start off by, bringing our best wishes for the American people, whichever way the outcome tonight is, whoever becomes president, whichever party takes over the House, all of this, what I've experienced as a Canadian driving through the swing states in this election cycle. I have had the opportunity to work with campaigns on a software which allows them to do GOTV to figure out, who are their supporters to get them out to vote. And what I've seen, I've gone to rallies, I have been on phone calls with candidates, I have been at campaign offices, and for somebody who's been politically active in Canada, not only as a political operative but also as a conservative candidate that ran in 2019 and worked on many different campaigns, whether provincially and federally and municipally. What I can say is that I've experienced, the people are really divided. It's very different compared to Canada. Whereas what's on the ballot in this election, you have the women's rights when it comes to abortion. The left and the right, are very divided. But what they feel is consensus is cost of living, right? The economy is the number one issue. Surprisingly enough, you think that, the geopolitical scene is big. No, really, people are looking at how are they going to put food on the table? What does it mean if they're a small business owner? What does it mean in terms of being able to maintain that business, keep their employees if they have some, pay for their mortgages, be able to send their kids to school? So that's number one. And then there is also, of course, everything else that's going on with the rhetoric on both sides, which we can get into. And so my experience has been that it's very divided on so many basic issues. Whereas in Canada, you don't have, the Constitution on the issue. You don't have, there's never been a rhetoric that, depending on if the Conservatives or the Liberals win, democracy at stake. We've never seen, these assassination attempts on Trump. To be able to switch out a candidate. This is the most consequential election. And what I want to do is if we can take a moment and just pray for this country and pray for the American people, but it also affects the rest of the world. We look at America in terms of where it's headed on. It's the world's greatest market, GDP. It leads when it comes to innovation. It has a major impact in different parts of the world when it comes to the wars that we're seeing in the Middle East or in Europe. So, if we can just have a moment to pray for Americans who, depending on tomorrow, we do think that tonight, things will end and there'll be a president, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow in some of these states. I'm in California right now. That's my California view. You're going to see a sunset soon. If Donald Trump wins, then California is going to have a different type of reaction. If Kamala Harris wins, then it's going to be a different type of reaction in Middle America. I do have to say that as I drove, so I was in my car driving through state by state and seeing Middle America like Oklahoma, Missouri, I went through Wisconsin, I went through Michigan, I went through Pennsylvania. And these are different demographics. It's not like you're in New York. It's not like Florida. It's not like Washington or California, where, that's what we think the rest of America looks like. It's completely a different story in each state, in each county. And I'm happy to break it down with you.
Sure, we will do that. I must appreciate, first of all, we like the California view in the background. So that's always good to see that. And at this point, if all four of us can be on screen and we want to take a moment, 10 seconds, 15 seconds to take a moment to pray. Is that what you're looking for?
Absolutely, because it's devastating to hear the concerns of the people on the ground. And it's, and I'll go into more detail, but let's start with a prayer for the American people and for the rest of the world, because this really affects us all.
I couldn't agree more before we head towards a 15-second silence, a moment of prayer for all Americans, but I couldn't agree more. That's why we put that headline, the world is watching it. Whoever becomes the next president, not only for millions of Americans, but of course for 8 billion on this planet. And I'm not just talking about just 8 billion, of course, species as well, because climate change, so many other host of issues. We'll be talking about that, but at this moment, 15 seconds of silence and prayer. Welcome back once again, and thank you for doing that amid all the chaos, if I may. You said word, and you've been talking about, and this is one thing we hear quite often, the U.S. elections. There people are divided, polarized, and I want to understand a little bit more from Robert, yourself, and Arvindji, and of course from our Quito will be joining us soon. We will be having, but before we move forward, I'd like to quickly tell you we will have a host of other guests. We will be having Mr. Pankaj Monga. He'll be talking about economy because it's very important about economy, jobs, inflation. Robert was mentioning earlier, inflation is one of the very important issues. So was Ramona, and I couldn't agree more. Inflation has always been one of the top issues anywhere there are elections, but we'll be talking more with Pankaj Monga. He'll be joining us shortly here in the studios to talk about economy. He's an expert on that one. He's been talking about economic affairs and covering many elections, including Canada's federal election, India election, and I remember Pankaj Monga when we covered US elections in 2016, 2020. So we'll talk with him. We'll have Quito shortly joining us. Quito, as Robert, they're in the polling business from Main Street Research. So both of them will be talking a lot about polls. We have Ramona Singh. She's contested herself as a conservative candidate. She's traveled a lot in US, so she will be giving us lots of coverage from US, what's happening there in US. But I also want to talk about the geopolitical issues, because America, as you were mentioning, Ramona ji, earlier, that yes, in the last century, there were many superpowers, but we saw the Ottoman Empire go away, Imperial Japan, and then again Imperial Germany or England. But then we had two superpowers. The Cold War, we've seen Russia and US. But in the 90s, we all saw how the USSR disintegrated, small countries, and from that point onwards, US has almost enjoyed the status of the single superpower. But now it's the rise of China, and then what we've seen in BRICS, Russia once again flexing its muscles, India at one side joining BRICS, and we have so many other countries at the BRICS summit. As much as we wanted to, not we actually, the Western countries did want to isolate Russia, but here we are, Russia circumventing all these countries, all these isolations or any of the sanctions, and Russia seemingly driving its economy well. The Ukraine war is very important. What will happen to the Ukraine war? It's very important. We'll talk about that. And China, India, US, Russia relationship. What happens in the Middle East? It's very important. The impact of Middle East on US elections and the impact of US elections on Middle East. We'll discuss that as well. How does the US elections impact Canada? There are many questions still unanswered, whether Donald Trump will be implementing the tariffs that he's talked about. And I don't think so. Even Kamala Harris, she's going to give us an easy run, because for a very simple reason, July 2026, once again, our leaders will be revisiting the trade agreement. So whoever becomes the next president, and by the time we'll be having elections here in Canada, the scheduled time is October 2025, if the government survives till that time. But then 2026 July isn't too far away. So many topics to discuss today. We'll take you to all that. But I want to understand this thing. Why the nation, we talk, is divided. Why the elections are so polarized, other than the rhetoric. And of course, we've heard some very harsh words from many of the candidates there. So Ramona ji, why don't I start with you, then I'll go towards Robert. I want to understand from both of you why, I mean, elections, you and I lose, I win, you lose. So it's always like that. It's a blood sport. But why the country is divided, why it's so polarized? Why don't we start with you, Ramona, and then we'll come to you. Robert, please.
Yes, so my experience has been, and I would say, there's things you can read, obviously, and listen to commentary, but I was on the ground, and I'll tell you, I was in Wisconsin for a big Trump rally, and I also went to the Democratic side as well, because I wanted to really get a good experience of what's really happening, and also to be able to contact all the different
Yeah, so
campaigns.
sorry to interrupt you. So sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to inform you from our Ymedia newsroom. We're getting the news. Georgia. At this point, we're getting news that yes, it's Trump leading, and then we also have Florida. Florida also Trump is leading. So I just wanted to alert you, Florida. We have 30 electoral votes there, so very comfortable position for Trump over there. That's the news from our new Ymedia newsroom. Virginia, very comfortably, very comfortably. We already knew this. Kamala Harris won't be able to do that. So 13 electoral college votes there. So with 13 votes there at stake, Virginia, that's in a very good positions. So we will be having next polls closing in about 10 to 12 minutes from now. So, and the first votes that are coming in at Ymedia newsroom from Battleground, Georgia. So we'll talk about all this. North Carolina, Ohio, West Virginia. I'm very interested to watch what is North Carolina. Of course, Virginia and Ohio too, but North Carolina, I'm very interested in watching that. I mentioned that North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania is, if you would ask me just one, that'll be Pennsylvania, but there's still time for that, and we will keep you posted. Sorry, I'll have to interrupt our experts, but sorry, carry on. We were discussing, Ramona ji, back to you. We were discussing why this election seems to be so polarized. We'll keep you updated. You see on the bottom of your screen, there are numbers there. We will keep you updated, but in 10 to 12 minutes, we have a lot more results coming for you. Ramona.
Yes, these are a really important time. So the division, what's happening? So I was on the ground at a Trump rally in Wisconsin. And what I noticed is, and I went to a few of them actually, and what I noticed is a demographic of people. First of all, Trump was, it was very easy to go to his rallies because he would just post it on his website. If you're in the area, you just sign up. 2 clicks, you're there. What I found with the Kamala Harris campaign was you had to actually go to the local districts that would host her, and that's if you could find what her schedule is, and to be able to go to those district websites and to be able to get a ticket to her event. So first of all, big difference in terms of the accessibility. But when I was at the Trump rally, what I noticed is, it was in the rural area. So what you saw there was the pickup trucks, you saw farming, you saw, the families and massive. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people at some places, tens of thousands of people. And and what I noticed was they all wore the Trump gear. Like it was, and it's a movement. It's become this movement of all the hats, T-shirts, and all kinds of stuff that everybody's wearing. And it was like a festival. You had musicians play, you had people talking, and you're standing out there for hours. But what I did notice is as I talked to people there was the consensus was they felt like they're forgotten. They felt like these are the people who've been generationally in America, who've been the backbone of America, who've built out the country. These are the labor people in some of these rural areas. And they said, has our country forgotten us? Why is it? And some of the parts when it came to the geopolitical scene, such as the war in Russia and Ukraine, the consensus seemed to be that they want some of that money spent back into the country. They want to make sure that they're able to work. Inflation being a massive thing, they recognize that under Trump, they had 4 years where they did really well. People were able to pay for things. The economy was booming. So they were able to compare that to the Biden-Harris administration. And that's the rally in Wisconsin. And you can see it's massive. This is the stuff you don't see on TV when they show his rallies. You don't actually see the crowd, and you see the music playing, and it's just a whole festival of its own. And so essentially, it's the consensus was, have they forgotten us, and how are we going to be able to step ahead? And on the flip side, when I went to the Democratic rallies, well, the issue there was they're afraid that what's happened with Roe v. Wade for women's rights. There's the gay community that's afraid that they're going to reverse back on that as well. So Trump is seen as a threat on that side as well. So it's very it's a time where the left and right cannot actually see eye to eye. I've seen it actually within the company and within families, that if you're voting a certain way, you actually keep it a secret, and fights break out and arguments break out. It's very different to Canada, where you could be a liberal or NDPer or a conservative, and even though you may disagree on certain things like where the tax dollars should be spent, but the general things such as healthcare isn't on the ballot, abortion rights isn't on the ballot. Like these things are gun rights. These are not on the ballot. Where in Canada, it's just about a percentage of tax being spent on this program versus that. Whereas in the United States, it is very emotional, and elections are an emotional thing. And this is what we're seeing, and you're also seeing the difference on what happens on mainstream media. Like you had 2 assassination attempts on Trump, and even though it was highlighted a little bit, it wasn't a massive thing. It's almost forgotten. It seems like old news. It goes to show how fast this news cycle is. Whereas if you can imagine, if there was an assassination attempt on President Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris, what that would mean with the rhetoric on the side to him being a threat to democracy. Other things that was highlighted to me was the fact that when I went to some other states which were more democratic, it was just, you cannot say you're supporting Trump, or it's not a thing. Whereas in Middle America, it was widely open, and it was just, and one thing I also noticed is when they talk about, like, you want to go electric when it comes to climate change, and have taking gas cars off, which is something that Kamala Harris had said when she was running for president back in 2020. If you drive through Middle America, there's just there's not even gas stations for miles at a time. The greenery and the farmland and all of that. So, it's a very different demographic in each state as you compare it, as you drive through it. So, I would say when I hear some of their policies, I almost come to think, like, have you traveled through your country? Have you seen how diverse it is? And like Pennsylvania, big deal, right? Fracking is a massive deal. The union workers, all of that, it was almost missed on the Democratic side. The other thing I noticed was that Kamala Harris is held to a higher account in terms of what she says or what she doesn't say, whereas it's come down to people, when it comes to Trump, it's everyone's kind of, we've gotten used to what the rhetoric he says, the things he says that sometimes are inappropriate, or majority of times are inappropriate. And what I've heard from many Democrats and independent voters, they have chosen to vote for him because if they're business owners, if they don't like where, some of them have even said the left has left us. And that's a theme that's coming up, whether it's in Muslim communities, whether it's in Hispanic communities, whether it's in Black communities that would traditionally vote Democratic, now are leaning towards Trump. And so that's also very interesting. And so that, that's why the polls are up in the air. Like, they've been tied, and it's still, as polls are closing, the exit polls are closing, we still don't know how this is going to go, because it could just come down to a few counties, a few 10,000s of votes that could determine this election.
Yeah, as you were just mentioning, there are a few poll numbers coming our way in moments from now. I'm not worried about South Carolina. I think it's going to be Trump all the way in South Carolina. I'm focusing on North Carolina, what happens in Wisconsin. I want to learn that. Vermont, I want to learn that. Pennsylvania is key for me. Nevada is key for me. Arizona is key for me. South Carolina, I think it's all the way Trump. And you just mentioned about media as well. Among other issues, I will talk about media as well. And we will talk who are the winners and losers in media. Yes, it has been definitely a very interesting battle between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, but clear winners or losers in media. So we'll talk about that as well, and why Washington Post didn't endorse any candidate this time. We all know that, why they didn't endorse, but what was the reason given by the Amazon owner, Jeff Bezos? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about LA Times. We'll talk about the Washington Post. Some of these newspapers have been selling for a good 100 years, 150 years. But here we are, after so many years or so many election campaigns, these newspapers have been endorsing one candidate or other. But suddenly, they changed their policy. Was it some ethical dilemma that they had, or what were the reasons any different? So we'll talk about that as well. But let me tell you, from the last 24 years, this has been the policy about Ymedia. I want to bring in Quito in this very interesting discussion about media, and when we'll go back to Ramona and Robert G. But before I bring in Quito, I just wanted to set a background for you. Quito, a very warm welcome on Ymedia. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, Yadvir. Thank you for having me, and happy Super Christmas.
I know. We've been. I know, our poll numbers with the, once again, we like to highlight that Ymedia has partnered with Main Street Research, and most of our poll numbers have been bang on up until now. But let's see how it goes with the US. Quito, before you join in, Robert was mentioning the poll numbers that we've put out. So I know it's Super Christmas, and I'm borrowing this from you. You always mention, Quito, at Ymedia that yes, it's Christmas time. We're going to open the package. So let's see. But what's your take today? It's election night. I know during the BC elections, Mississauga mayor elections, and few other elections, right at the start, you would pick your candidate, you would say something, and it was bang on all the time. But today, it's going to be very difficult. So what's your take right at the start? Please, Quito.
Yeah, it's been very interesting ride. We've been polling the U.S. now for the last 18 months, and lots of ups and downs. Obviously, our own polls. We released our battleground polls, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, on Monday. Having Harris winning all three, Wisconsin by 1, very narrow. Within the margin of error, Michigan by 2, and Pennsylvania by 2. There's a lot of mixed signals out there today. Looks like our Florida poll right now with about 59% reporting. We had it +9. Right now it's sitting at about an 8.5 point lead for Donald Trump in Florida. So that one looks pretty good. Although the Senate race looks a little wider than what we had for that. But and then in the national popular vote right now, it sits, Donald Trump has the, very, very, very early. Donald Trump has the popular vote lead, but we know.
All right. And before we move further, we have more numbers coming your way. We will take you to our Ymedia newsroom. We have more numbers coming here. But before we go for these numbers, Robert, I want to come back to you. Virginia, among other states, which Quito was just mentioning, are very close. I want to ask you, I think Virginia is too close to call. What's your take on Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, we're not calling Virginia at this point yet, obviously. But that being said, though, Virginia famously late counting. You really need to see the DC suburbs before we get that. Specifically, Fairfax County. We have some stuff in here in Prince William County, but Fairfax, Virginia, very, very little reporting there. I'm seeing just a couple hundred votes. You're going to have a couple 100,000 votes, and Democrats are expected to win 60+% of that. So, don't worry about Virginia. I know we always talk about Virginia could be competitive. It always looks competitive initially because a lot of the smaller rural counties report first. So Virginia, I'm fairly confident in a Biden win, but I actually a Harris win. Sorry,
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Because I know North Carolina and Ohio, they're too close to call. Virginia is too close to call, but West Virginia, Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump for West. Donald Trump has been declared the winner in West Virginia. Virginia too close to call. Ohio, North Carolina will still keep on talking. Robert, carry on.
Yeah, no, I expect Virginia to be closer than in 2020. Biden won Virginia by about 10 points. In our modeling, that's about a 6 to 7 point win. We actually do expect Harris to do worse in the DC suburbs than Biden. Again, not imperiling Virginia. We fully expect her to win that. But we do expect a little bit of erosion there. And we actually are seeing this already. We have about 11,000 votes in Prince William County already, and that's exactly what we're seeing. As it stands, again, very small percentage of the vote in an outer Virginia county, but she is doing a bit worse. So again, I fully expect her to win Virginia, but it's probably going to be a bit closer than in 2020. West Virginia, that's not a surprise. That's Donald Trump country. That you would expect that exactly. Obviously, they're winning, like he's winning that one. That's the basically West Virginia is the thesis of the Donald Trump campaign going back to 2016 is you win massive margins in rural America, and that's basically what West Virginia is. Talking about Florida really quickly, as Keto was mentioning, our poll was about a 9-point lead for Trump. Currently, it's slightly less than that, but again, Florida has some counties in a different time zone. Those haven't reported yet, so I fully expect that one to come into line. The area where our poll isn't doing the greatest is the Senate race. We had it at competitive. We had Rick Scott up about 4 points. He's actually outperforming Trump right now, and that's all polls had that. But additionally, we're seeing that in other Senate races as well, where actually Senate candidates are actually doing better than Trump in a lot of races, not just in Florida. You're seeing it a little bit in Indiana as well, somewhat better in Virginia as well. And that is very important, not necessarily for the Senate, a little bit for Senate, right? Because obviously Democrats' hopes on holding the Senate hinge on key wins in Ohio. If they don't win Ohio, there's no path for them to holding the Senate whatsoever. So if Republican Senate candidates are overperforming Trump, that's extremely important. Now, currently, it's in solid Republican territory, so that's less important. But if we start seeing that in Ohio, if Moreno overperforms Trump in Ohio, that's game over. You can call the Senate right off the bat. You can basically say Senate's done. Republicans win the Senate. That also has important implications on the House races as well. I'm looking at the House race here in the Florida 13th. That's Paulina Luna. She is winning. This was supposed to be a competitive race. It is still competitive. She's winning it by about. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Robert, sorry to interrupt. There are two more results coming our way. I'm going to talk about that as well. But before I do that, you were mentioning Florida, Georgia. I want to quickly pick your mind. Florida, we knew. It's Trump will dominate there. That's fine. But and Georgia, we knew Trump will be dominating here. But last time in 2020, Georgia was very close. Probably, what is the reason? The initial numbers that we're seeing. It's going to be a cakewalk in Georgia for Trump. Why it has become so easy in Georgia for Trump? Why?
It is not. The reason it is Trump has a massive lead in Georgia is you have nothing out of Fulton County, which is Atlanta. Nothing out of that at all. We are very, very early days here in Georgia. We're not going to know Georgia until well into the night. Don't ignore the numbers you're seeing. You only have about 500,000 votes in Georgia. I think you're expecting several million, I think 8 million. And again, nothing out of Fulton County of Atlanta, 100,000 of votes there. Don't worry about Georgia right now.
Okay, because that was a concern, because if it's that close, why are we seeing those early numbers? Okay, these are early numbers. Another question, I'll go back to Quito once again. I want to talk a little bit, because they're telling me that we are going to see very soon numbers are coming in from so many other places. But early lead for Trump, he's win in few states, but we'll talk about that. Why don't we talk about media for a bit here? And I want everyone's views, starting with Quito, and then Robert, and then Ramona. I want everyone's views here. Let's talk about Washington Post, LA Times. These are the newspapers they've been selling for 50, 100, 150 years. And when I came to Canada in about 24 years ago, and we started running this Ymedia, I was surprised to see Toronto Star, Globe and Mail endorsing Liberal Party, NDP, and I was quite surprised. Why would you endorse anybody? And not just at the federal level. I also saw, Mississauga mayoral candidate, Toronto mayoral candidate. I was quite surprised. And then I realized UK does that, US does that, Australia does that, New Zealand, the newspapers do that. But we made it a policy 24 years ago, we'll never do that. The reason I've always heard is, publishers would endorse, or the editorial department would endorse, but there's separate newsroom, the reporters are separate. How would you expect if a publisher has endorsed, or the editorial in part has endorsed a particular party? This time we saw, after so many years of endorsement, Washington Post backing out. Was it for political reasons? Whatever the reasons was, I want you to answer, but we're glad At this point, I want to put it on record. We are glad 24 years ago, Ymedia made a decision never to endorse any political party, any candidate for the mayor. And today, Washington Post, LA Times, and so many other papers are doing that. They're calling it for ethical reasons that, yes, print media or any other media for that matter should not be endorsing. But they've lost a lot of subscribers. Last I checked, it was 250,000 subscribers Washington Post has lost, though they're claiming few subscribers have come in. And we know Jeff Bezos, he owns Amazon's, and then he also owns other space projects. But and also I wanted to, if you could also touch upon Elon Musk. He owns Twitter now, and he also owns a space company, but he's also clearly supporting Trump. So how does this play out? Role of media. Quito will start with you, then Ramona, and then Robert. Quito, we'll start with you. Role of media in US elections.
Yeah, I think there's different schools of thought on this. Lots of people say that media has the role of when they see one or more political parties overstepping the bounds of rhetoric on to one degree or another, that they have the duty to speak up and say something as an organization and hold to task political candidates who may not be adequately taken to task by their opponents. The other school of thought, I've always, as a pollster, having worked with different media outlets for over the last 10, 15 years, that independence of media that needs to stay above and outside the political arena. So, in the US, again, it's very polarized. It's gotten more polarized. I think we're seeing more and more what I call digital tribes, where, if you're a Fox news watcher, likely that's where your, political leanings lie. You're a CNN person. If you're getting most of your news on Twitter, as was announced today, as the largest source of news, these are, there is also a danger at a certain point of a certain media outlet having too much power in terms of making those kinds of endorsements. So I more lean towards media staying neutral, as Ymedia has done, as Main Street Research has done, as a polling firm. We don't take sides. We measure and report. But the U.S. has certainly gotten very polarized and interesting in that regard of late.
Okay. Ramona, what's your take, Ramona? Please go ahead.
What's been really interesting is that in this election, we've seen that the presidential candidates have shown up on podcasts, whether they're on X or on YouTube. This has been, a time where now they're calling, mainstream media, whether it's CNN or Fox or ABC or NBC, as legacy media. And if you just look at the sheer numbers, like Donald Trump, went on so many different podcasts that had a massive following. That's where people sit now, right? Like, not too many people now watch news on CNN or Fox. Rather, they like to listen to Joe Rogan. They like the, long sort of coverage, whether it's 3 hours and some of the commentary that they're seeing. So Donald Trump showed up on Aiden Ross's live stream. It's on YouTube. Essentially, he has 2.6 million views on that. Then there was the past weekend with Theo Vaughn. That was on August 20th. That was 14 million views. Then there was the Sean Ryan show, 3.5 million views. I mean, it just keeps going on. Then he showed up on Flagrant. So all of these different podcasts have their audience. And as he showed up to where the audience is sitting, whether it's with, Gen X or different generations, he was able to send out his message because essentially, Kamala Harris had 60 days, right? She was put into place. She had a very short time to campaign, but for the first half of her campaign, she wasn't doing interviews. She sat down and did a CNN interview. It was like, something that was shown for like 20 minutes. and it was with her running mate. Then she did her 60-minute interview where, they actually hammered her on certain questions in terms of how she's going to deliver on her promises. But what we saw differently with Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, they were taking interviews wherever they could, whether it was on YouTube, whether it was on X, with Elon Musk. I mean, it was all over. And the latest one was with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan endorsed Donald Trump yesterday, which is a massive thing. So now you're seeing that these influencers, as you would call them, who has massive following, Joe Rogan has 37.8 million views from just that one interview. When they step out and they endorse a candidate, and essentially they're all saying, if they invited both candidates and they said, come on and we want to talk to you and have a simple conversation, maybe not so heavy on policy, but get to know the person and in a relaxed environment, ask them questions. Kamala Harris caught on as well. And so she did, the podcast Call Her Daddy, and went on a few other ones. So they were strategic in what they chose. But what we found in this election, there is a gender gap that Donald Trump is doing really well with men and Kamala Harris is doing really well with women. That's the other thing we got to pray for, right? Because at the end of the day, this gender gap that we're seeing in terms of who they are supporting, and I guess the exit polls will tell us, but it was very interesting. And I think just as Obama was, the candidate in 2008 election that really started using, social media to drive his base out to vote for him. And then we saw in Trump's election in 2016, where, he was also using social media. But now in this election cycle, I have to tell you, I subscribe to all of them. So I was getting text messages, probably about 10 to 15 from Donald Trump a day. Kamala Harris, about 3 or so. The difference was Trump's text messages, again, going to where the voters are, right? So no longer just legacy media, but now getting on the handsets, going straight to people's handsets, going straight to where the audiences sit on podcasts. With the difference with Donald Trump messaging when it came to text messages, guess what? Text message is a great tool because 98 to 99% of people open up their text messages within the first 3 minutes of receiving it, right? So it's immediate. If you don't even recognize a number, you still read it, which is better than email and other forms of communication. And what he would do is he's very strategic. Text messages, 160 characters, including space and all of that. And it was very precise. He would say his tagline, and then he would have a link to go and take a poll on his website and donate. Whereas Kamala Harris's campaign was a little bit different when it came to reaching people on their handsets. Essentially, they would send out an email. Email would have, like 5 paragraphs, and then they would copy and paste that email onto a text message. So I'd get a text message and it would look like a massive article. Now, do I read the whole thing? Not so much, but they use pictures. They use pictures of celebrities. That's the other thing I want to talk about. Celebrities were used on the Democratic side, which is, that's another interesting point. At the time where you have P. Diddy and, all the slew of lawsuits and him getting charged and awaiting trial. And then you had, a time where people are kind of mistrusting their celebrities because of all the scandals that have come out of late. You had Kamala Harris bring out a lot of celebrities on stage, and some may be popular with, with Beyonce coming out and saying a few words, but not really. People thought that she was going to put on a concert, with the Oprah show and all of that, doing a town hall for her. So really, we saw the Democratic Party use celebrities and different platforms to be able to reach people. And we saw Donald Trump really go anywhere and everywhere to say his message. So this was an interesting time. I think this is going to set the trend moving forward, where if you're a presidential candidate, no longer are you relying on the mainstream media, going to your CNN, ABC, Fox, but now really going to some of these podcasts that have more views than traditional media. And they also don't have the same sort of advertisers, right? Where they can say anything, they can ask anything of the candidates. And I think we're gonna see more of that happen, absolutely.
Okay, that's quite interesting information. There are so many other things happening, but at this point, once again, I'd like to tell you almost $10.5 billion of ad spend in this U.S. elections. If you want to know the total bill, I think it's going to pass $16 billion. Last time the total bill in 2020 elections, the total spend was $15 billion. There are not many spending limits, just as you have in other elections. I've seen in England, Australia, India they have a spending limit too. Canada, we do have spending limits, but in the U.S., that's where it stands right now, almost $16 billion. That's the bill we're going to get once these elections are over. But I'll also tell you who spend more, the Democrats or the Republicans, who spend more from the presidential till the county. I'll give you all those numbers very soon. But before we do that, I have to welcome Mr. Pankaj Monga. He has been with us for a good 18 years now, covering lots of elections in Canada, in India, and the US elections as well. Pankaj, a very warm welcome on Ymedia.
Thank you very much, Ymedia. I remember sitting here like 10 years back also, 12 years back also. We have like done this, I think Obama time also, before that also.
Yeah.
So, these are the years which we spent together basically.
Robert was just mentioning, about inflation being one of the major issues. Inflation becomes a major issue, and I know Kuto was also mentioning that. Ramonaji also mentioned. So we're all using the word inflation. So when it comes to economy, inflation, numbers, we have the expert. So what do you have to say? I mean, take us through for just 2-3 minutes, because polls are closing in 16 states. 16 states and DC. In just few minutes, I want to go back to Robert and Quito and Ramona once again. But quickly take us in few minutes. Economy. US, where does Kamala Harris stand? Where does Donald Trump stand? And for our viewers in Canada, I know we're anxious to know who wins. But we'll talk about the tariffs as well. We'll talk about so many other issues which will impact India and so many other things. Economy, trade, please.
Definitely. Basically, Ymedia, if you see inflation, it was not anybody's fault. It was it came through COVID and those kind of situations. Yeah, there were central bank heads. It can be US, Europe, or Canada. Anybody, they all were saying in the starting, it's a transitory, it will go away itself, but it never happened. So they had to take the action. They took the action. They had taken their interest rate to the roof. All, not like only US, everybody took it. And economy-wise, if you see, right now, US is in very, very strong situation. US economy is doing really, really good. Their GDP is good, their employment is good. Their import is really good. Retail is showing good numbers. So, yes, Canada-wise, if you see, we are in a bad situation right now. Canada is not in that good shape where we can see that GDP is not growing that much. Last GDP report was like, what, 0%? So nothing came into like in picture from our side. And if I see Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
Can I interrupt you for a minute? Yeah. So, you know what? The challenge that I am facing, and you just mentioned US economy is doing pretty well. Up until 2014, my style was, and in India as well, I would always read, hard copies. By the way, I'll just plug in my thing as well here. Midweek newspaper, now we've termed it as one of the largest free English newspapers in Canada. So it is the largest free English newspaper in Canada, Midweek newspaper. Do pick your copy. The front page will highlight who is the winner. So hot off the press, that'll be on Midweek. Till 2014, I would always read the print editions. Then I, switched on to the digital. But from the last 3 months, I've switched back to hard copies. As much I still have the digital subscription. But when I read the articles on one side, they say US is doing amazingly well. Their economy, as you just mentioned, is great. The job numbers are good. Everything is, a rosy picture is painted. Fine. But suddenly I read a different article where there's so many challenges. Ramona ji just mentioned on the ground, there are people who are struggling. I'm not only talking politically, I'll talk politically as well, and economically as well. What am I missing here?
Inflation.
Inflation, okay.
Basically inflation, because of inflation, people who all are cannot meet their needs, those people are struggling. Yeah, sure, they are struggling, but businesses are doing very well. Corporates are doing very well. Jobs numbers are showing us that. GDP numbers are showing us that. only the inflation, which is coming down now, slowly, it will come down. It's not like inflation is not coming down. If you see US, their inflation is like well in control. Yeah, not that much, because it's 2.5% basically. So 2.5%, 2.4% is still higher, but it will come down. Now the interest rate have started coming down. 0.50 interest rate they have already reduced. Now we will see in December also somewhere the interest rate will go down. So I know it will take time. It happens always when the interest rate went up. It took time to take. It took effect. Like it has taken that much time where it took full impact. Now the interest rates are coming down. It will take time, at least 8 to 12 months, to get that impact of जिसको कहते हैं ना आम आदमी. So those people like will get slowly that kind of relief. But yeah, I cannot see that where if the grocery prices are up, I am not seeing any deflation here. There will be no deflation. So grocery prices will start. It will not reduce. It will not increase that much. So inflation is now at 2.4% for them.
Yeah, quickly, we are moments away from 16 states and DC. The polls close there. We will get you with numbers. I know we have to talk to Robert as well, but very quickly, since we're talking economy, and for our viewers here sitting in Canada, Trump, he's been mentioning 10% tariff. I know everyone is talking about that, and he didn't mention only for Canada, but all imports in US. They've already applied, tariffs for vehicles coming from China. But in case, I was looking at, and let me highlight the source here. I was looking at a brilliant graph in Globe and Mail. TD Economics put it across, which clearly states, if at all, Trump puts these 10% tariffs, which he's been talking about, it's going to be very difficult for Canada. Our numbers for 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, I see GDP 2%, 2.56, but it can come down to 1.4, 1.3. It's going to create havoc here and lots of losses of job. Our real estate is struggling here. Our trucking industry, many of our people in the South Asian company, they are big transporters. The finance is struggling, real estate is struggling, the trucking industry is struggling, taxi industry was already struggling with Uber. And here, in case we see these tariffs and Kamala Harris isn't going to be easy, what's your take?
Yeah, that's a disaster for us, basically, because if 10% tariff, I normally use, instead of tariff, call it tax. Okay. It's basically a 10%, you are increasing the price for everything. Every export will have 10% impact. And many places, like you spoke about transport industry, they are already struggling. If the export reduces, it will the impact will be more on those people like transport industry. And see, if I see in different way, any manufacturing, I don't know how many manufacturing companies have 10% or 15% margin. Normally, manufacturing works on volume. Then there is a retailer, transportation, and those kind of things. Retailer makes more than wholesaler or manufacturer. So if we are selling anything for $10, $100, now the thing is $110. US company will say, no, we want in $100 only. So you take the charges. Basically, they are reducing our company's margin. Otherwise, they will go somewhere else and take it. So if somebody cannot produce the $100 thing in $90 or $85, they are out of the business. We have seen with lumber earlier also, 10%, 20%, whatever was happened. So many factories were closed down in BC side and Alberta side. Yeah, it might be, I don't know, it might be better for somehow for US businesses because he will reduce the taxes for them. But they will suffer also because they have to bring the things from outside. And things are becoming more expensive in US because of those tariffs. So I think Trump is taking it wrong. this whole thing with the tariff kind of situation. And if we go with Kamala Harris side, the situation will be as it's running right now. It will be cool. So
I'll come to you because we have few more results. I want to go to Robert for a second. Thank you for highlighting that. And we will carry on this discussion about trade, economy, geopolitical situation. I still have to talk about what will be the geopolitical situation, what happens in Middle East, what happens in Europe, especially Russia and Ukraine. We'll talk about that, China, India, Russia, the picture that we all saw. Modi in the center, we had Putin on one side and we had China on one side. They're all holding their hands together, BRICS. And then we also have India in G20, India just attending the Quad Summit in US. And after, when the reporters asked what's going to happen after November 5th, and we had Joe Biden highlighting Modi's going to take over and take the lead in Quad. Is that going to happen? We're going to talk about all these situations. But Robert, why don't I come to you, Robert? We're seeing, are we seeing an early lead for Trump here? If I look at the numbers on the screen, just for anyone who's watching, if you could explain us, where do we stand right now as we speak? Robert.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not seeing anything definitive either way. Trump is winning 100%, but it's expected he'd be winning at this point. We had a poll with Trump +9 in Florida. Some pollsters had it less. I think Trump's currently up by about 10-ish points in Florida, 10, 11. Maybe that gets a little higher, but again, that's nothing too crazy. Florida deviated from the national trend in the 2022 midterms as well. So that, I think people are kind of reading too much into that Florida result. Kind of ignore that Florida result. That's fine. Little concerning sign for the Democrats is in Loudoun County, Virginia. Again, Democrats expected to win Virginia pretty handily. I'm not convinced that state's going to change hands tonight, but they have suffered a pretty large swing against them in Loudoun County. This is the D.C. suburbs. This is the ground Harris needs to be winning, and by a lot, to be able to win this election, right? It's a bit of a more diverse area, so you expect maybe there's some loss there with minority voters, which I think is going to be the story of tonight. But again, that's a little bit of a concerning sign there. Again, I think there's still some vote left that could get up. But again, Harris currently leads in North Carolina. That one is probably a little shaky, but again, there's still a lot of vote left in a lot of Democratic-leaning counties, but again, a lot of vote in the rurals. In Atlanta, still nothing from Fulton County, still nothing from Atlanta. So, very, very little from Fulton County. Only a couple hundred votes and nothing definitive there. Ohio,
yeah,
right
Robert, as much as I agree with you. Yeah, Robert, as much as I agree with you, these are very early moments at this time. I see the vote count of 4%, 9%, 16%, which is fine. I agree with you. And by the way, I'm still keeping my eyes on Pennsylvania, but Georgia as well. Georgia, still you see good lead there from 4% vote count to 9%. Now it's around 18% vote count. I know it's still very early in North Carolina, Georgia. But quickly, I was just watching the exit poll numbers because I was waiting. Exit poll numbers, I'm especially interested in the swing states. The exit poll numbers say Kamala Harris, she has a slight edge in the swing states. I want your take, Robert, quickly on that.
Yeah, I mean, in the exit poll, there's a couple ways you can read it, right? Yes, she has an edge in the swing states, I guess, but at the same point in time, the swing states kind of look a lot like the national environment as well. So just because you're maybe slightly winning in the swing states, it's an exit poll. There is still some error there, right? So again, it's early. We really only have some substantial vote from Georgia. We have more from Georgia than other swing states, but a lot of that is more rural vote. So not the end of the world there in Georgia, not a lot from North Carolina. We have a lot from Florida, and that's pretty bad, and we expected it to be pretty bad, but that's roughly what we're looking at there. So again, it's a little too early. We'll probably have a better picture very soon, but for now, this is roughly in line with what we expected.
Yeah, Florida is for Trump. He's been declared as the winner. Tennessee, Florida, Trump has been declared as the winner. Tennessee, Trump has been declared as the winner. I'll come back to you. These are very interesting moments right now. But I want to go to Quito for a minute. Quito, you've been polling for so many months in US, and now you've also seen the exit polls. You're also seeing early numbers here. A few states clearly moving towards Trump. Is everything happening from your perspective on the expected lines, or do you see any surprises here? Twitter.
I would say, it's interesting to me that right now, that the Democrats are leading in Ohio and in North Carolina, and yeah, as you said, Florida's been declared for Trump, leading roughly by just under 10 points. It looks like our poll there is going to be pretty bang on. I interesting to note that with very little reporting, the Democrats have taken the lead now in Texas as well. So um, I think we're going to see this popular vote number shrink, or we would expect it to in the next over the next couple of hours. Georgia, as Robert has said a couple of times, there's still some really key states, key counties that have not yet reported. Coming out of Fulton now, it's 71% for Harris, 214,000 votes. Now we're starting to see that gap close very, very quickly. I should note that Douglas County, which has the highest reporting number, where Harris is overperforming the model. These are the suburbs of Atlanta. So we're seeing some mixed signals in some of these counties, where Trump is overperforming in some, Harris is overperforming in some. I think the North Carolina number should be, heartening for Democrats, and what's happening in Ohio so far. Although I'll note mostly the cities now are reporting, and not a lot of the rural. But this is still really way too close to call, and we're going to be here for a couple more hours at least, until we have a definitive idea of where it's leaning towards.
Yes, and once again, we like to tell you 95 for Donald Trump, 270 is the magic number. Right now, 95 for Donald Trump, 35 for Kamala Harris. We'll keep you updated. There are quite a few numbers coming in. So 95 for Donald Trump and 35 for Kamala Harris, 270. That's the magic number. That's the number needed. So we'll keep you posted. These are still very early numbers here, but still Donald Trump has taken an early lead. We know it looks like they'll both go past 200. Maybe 215 as well, maybe 219 as well. But then from there on, I think so they'll go past 200, but from there on, who will reach the magic number of 270? That'll be very interesting to watch in the next, I would say, 1.5 hour. There'll be a lot more clarity on this one as we keep you posted. Ramona ji, I'll come to you. You've covered a lot of elections this year on the ground, traveling to different states. If I were to ask you, could you explain very briefly why did you see supporters, favoring Trump, and why would the voters support Kamala Harris? Your take, please.
Yeah, great question. We've talked a lot about inflation and cost of living and affordability, but the other massive thing is immigration. There's been, 20 million who have come into the United States illegally. And that's been a massive issue that's happened on Biden and Kamala Harris's, administration. And this is something that people are upset about. I mean, I've talked to all kinds of people, driving through the country, from, leaving from Toronto to get to California and going through all the swing states in between, and also reaching out and talking to so many different campaigns, and right now I am working with Democratic campaigns as well as Republican as a vendor, and just listening to what's going on and going to the rallies and being on the ground. They are, this is a massive thing, immigration, and that's where some of the independent voters, which is what both sides needed to be able to grab in this election cycle, are very well concerned about. And even the Democratic side, they're concerned about it. So when you have some of these border states, that's a massive issue. And that is something that would affect Arizona. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Arizona goes. We already see how Texas is going. Obviously, we predict how California is going to go. And the other thing is crime. Crime has risen, and not just statistically. This is what people also feel in many different neighborhoods, and this is something that Trump has been actively talking about. Trump has been the candidate for being tough on crime and being tough on, illegal border crossing and saying immigration laws should come back into effect and to be able to enable the security of the wall. He campaigned on building the wall, and this is a big part of it. Whereas Kamala Harris on the other side, first it was said that she was the border czar, and then mainstream media said she wasn't. So there, there's a bit of, there's a lot of those things when it comes around Kamala Harris. I think the 60 days that she has been the candidate, for most part of it, people have tried to get to know her. Where does she stand on certain issues when it comes to immigration, when it comes to crime? And really what happens with Kamala Harris is that she hasn't really talked about the last 4 years. And the interviews that she has done on mainstream media and some on the podcast, they don't really hammer her hard on the Biden administration's, where they've gone wrong on some of these key things. What she does focus on is when she was district attorney in California and how she was tough on crime, given that California is a border state, but really not much in the last 3.5 years as vice president. So that's been a big miss for people because they do care. And when you look at like the United States Army, that's 1.5 million, and then you have 20 million illegals. So this is something that JD Vance and Donald Trump, the two of them, as they've done interviews and on their campaign, have said, hey, day one, they're going to make sure that they're tougher on that. They're going to crack down on this because it's really affected some of these neighborhoods. And so those are definitely massive things that we're seeing the difference in terms of just basic things. It seems like who's the candidate that's got common sense around tough on crime, having immigration laws, under control, having the economy under control, making sure that it is a place where people, the great American dream, where did that go? This is what people are wondering. They're saying it's been really hard, and on top of that, all these other things, those other factors have made it harder on them. And Kamala Harris, unfortunately, given that she is, the vice president, she hasn't really said much about it. And of course, and Donald Trump has been strong voice on, some of the crime issues with the illegal immigrants that are in the country. And he goes and, the families of people who have lost their loved ones because of the crime increase in their neighborhoods, that's been a massive thing. So these are like basic things that, that people want answers to know what is the plan? What are you going to do? How are we going to get by? Those things are more important than right now what's happening in the Middle East for them, or what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. Top of mind is the basic domestic issues.
Okay. And at this point, Pankaj, I'll come back to you very quickly. 2026 July, that is the time Canada and US could review the trade pact that we have, USMCA, that's we call it here. Earlier it was NAFTA, now USMCA. Kamala, she's indicating that they want access to our dairy as well. So that's another challenge. The tariffs we've already discussed, and as just Ramonaji was mentioning, undocumented or illegal, whether it's 12, 15, or 20 million. But Trump says he's going to deport them all. So he's talked a lot about that. But even if 2 million or 3 million are about to be deported, out of them may 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 decide, why don't we move to Canada, legally or illegally? We're already facing so many challenges here at the border already. And by the way, we all know Canada is reducing its immigration numbers after a long time. We're also putting a cap on the student visas. They get us about $22 billion. So Canada could face challenges. I want you to talk about two issues regarding the dairy access that US would need, and the second, if the undocumented migrants decide to come to US, so to Canada, there'll be a challenge.
First thing I will talk about dairy. Dairy, I know we have problem now with dairy, and we don't want to give that much access also. Right. They need to fight for that. Otherwise, our dairy will be finished, because they can bring dairy from US and they can flood the market, and the prices will be lower, and our farmers will not be able to survive, basically. So last time also they fought for that. They given little 1% or 2% more access. So I think this time also they will fight for that. Otherwise we'll be in problem for dairy side. dairy is a very protected area for us, and we want to protect that. And
As much as we want to protect our farmers, I couldn't agree more on that one. But the consumers could benefit. Please.
yes, consumer can benefit from that, but we are actually wiping out the whole industry
Okay.
from our country, which we, as a country, we don't want to do that. Otherwise, then everything can come from US. Then why we are like producing anything here? We can bring it from China, US, or other places. So we don't want to wipe our whole industry. That's why we need to protect that. And that should be a big issue when we are discussing our USMCA review when 2026 happens. So I think this they will fight for that, what I feel.
And just for viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you that as much as we're talking about July 2026, but things are not too far away. We will see the Senate, we'll see all this House, and I think in US, within a month or two, they'll get going, they'll start discussing, and they could be reviewing in a month or two. So maybe after January 20th, I think the max we could see action in February or in March.
Yes.
So February or March, we'll start seeing action from the US for this trade pact. And in Canada, we still have a government, if at all it survives till October 2025. But then who will be dealing with them? And in case we leave it for the next government, there won't be much time left for the next government.
I think I am hearing those news. Every media is reporting now that our prime minister, our foreign minister, our premiers, they all are saying they have now good relations.
Yeah.
They are well prepared.
We know Trump.
We know Trump.
Yeah.
we knew Obama. We know Trump, and we know Joe Biden. So they have gone through 3 presidencies.
Yeah.
So they have seen different ways to work. So I think they have learned their lessons here. They might do, I hope, and they might do better this time, the way they are saying. And they are lobbying also, if we see. Premiers are going, and our foreign minister or our prime minister, everybody is lobbying, and they want to make their relation better with them, US partners. And many companies and many states directly do business with us. They are also involved in this, and they can also be impacted with many things. So I think, I hope so. We can do better, or not, like at least whatever we have, we can keep that. Second thing, undocumented. Yes, those people can be a problem for us, Ymedia, because we already have flooded our market basically with people. We don't have that much space. We don't have real estate. We don't have hospitals. We don't have that many schools, and many things. Our roads are busy. Our highways are packed, jammed. So we brought so many people here, and we are in problem right now. And if 500,000 or million people come from there, we need to secure our borders then, because we need more laws, good laws where we can keep them in check. Otherwise, we will be in problem.
Yeah, we could face all those challenges. I want to come back to you, Robert, once again. So where are we with numbers right now? I know I've been advised that we will be seeing more numbers in around 6 to 7 minutes. But Robert, where do we stand right now?
Yeah, so right now, again, I've been just kind of looking around at some numbers. This does not look good for Harris. This is not what you want to see. I'll just talk about Texas quickly. This was not supposed to be a particularly competitive state tonight. We expected Trump to win it. The question was going to be by how much. But in looking at some of the county, like the Dallas early vote, that's a lot lower than you'd expect for Democrats. Tarrant County, just next door, again, a lot lower. The northern suburbs, again, of Collin and Denton, those are a lot bigger margins you had expected. Democrats generally are expected to do better in the early vote. Maybe that's not the case this year, and that the vote you get early in Texas is that early vote. But unless a lot of Democrats have massively shifted to voting on the election day in Texas, That's kind of lights out in Texas. Now, again, Texas not supposed to be necessarily the most competitive. Trump was supposed to win it. That's fine. And again, there is still a path here for Harris, but remember, and we're still very, very early in Pennsylvania. The margins in Philadelphia County look pretty good. The margins in Allegheny County and Pittsburgh, they look pretty good. We've got some good margins in the Midwestern states. But at this point, when you're seeing these numbers in these other states, all these are interconnected. So when you see a number that doesn't look good in one state, it also means that there is that you're going to eventually see that in another state as well, right? So this is again, there was always going to be a very narrow path for victory for Harris tonight. That path just is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And at this point, I think I'd kind of much rather be Trump at this point, to be honest.
Okay, and what do you see? What do you make out of the Senate? The Republicans are doing okay right now, but they haven't picked up any of the Democrat seat, and Democrats, I see they could pick up one. So, what's your take on the Senate right now?
Yeah, so technically Republicans have gained one, the West Virginia one, but that one was, you could have called that weeks ago. That one doesn't really matter that much. Technically Democrats are leading in Texas, but that's a mirage. Again, the rural votes report later. The way Texas reports is that the big cities of Dallas and Houston and Austin, they report first, but then as the rurals come, they eventually overtake it. The thing is, that's why you need those massive urban margins. If you don't have, like, that's why when you look at the early vote in Dallas, you can just say this is over because it's just not enough. You're still winning it, but it's just not enough voters and it's not enough margin. It's lights out in Texas. That being said, at the rate we're going with Republican Senate candidates, again, Republican Senate candidates basically overperforming in Florida. Again, it was expected Rick Scott would win. He's winning by a lot more than expected. Republican Senate candidates are actually basically performing same as Trump. Now, in our polling and pretty much all polling, Republican Senate candidates were actually doing worse than Trump, pretty much across the board. They were all underperforming Trump by quite a lot. In Ohio, it is close. Sherrod Brown is overperforming Harris in Ohio, but I don't think by enough. And again, unless Harris wins Ohio, which is not expected, and there's still a lot of rural vote out in Ohio, unless Harris were to win Ohio, which would be a massive upset, I don't think Sherrod Brown is going to be able to hold on. It's very unlikely. It's possible he could win, but I think that's going to be a very, very heavy lift for Democrats there in Ohio to hold that Senate, even though they're currently leading in it now. But again, this is where we're at right now. The numbers, some of the early voting numbers don't look good for Democrats. Could those?
Right, and
Yes.
yeah, and
go ahead.
at this point, I also want to talk about a bit about ethnic vote before I go back to Quito and come back to you, Pankaj. We'll have another guest soon, Robert, but I want to talk with Ramona ji for a minute. I want her viewpoint, and of course, everybody else can also talk about this one. I want to talk about the ethnic vote. We've heard a lot about the Samosa caucus. That's what they call the Indian Americans, the Samosa caucus. But you know what? I've coined a phrase: samosa, curry, pasta, shawarma, because I want to talk about the Arab American. Because I was listening, I recently visited a Yemeni restaurant here in Mississauga, and these guys were talking. Yemeni Americans are doing very well, and then I listened to Arab Americans in U.S. how there are cities in Michigan which are heavily dominated by Arabs there, and it has been a while since they come there. So I want to talk about Arabs, I want to talk about Yemenis, I want to talk about Persians there, I want to talk about Indian Americans there, so black vote as well. So the color vote I want to talk. Ramona, if you could highlight what's going on with all these things there, and how does this impact the U.S. elections, please?
Yes, it's a strange election cycle because what was traditional Democratic voters have now shown a lot of favorability towards Trump. Trump is not like the Republican Party isn't. This is like the Trump Party, and so that's where the difference is, right? Trump, you could say he's run the longest campaign, right? We saw him since the 90s on TV. He ran 15 seasons of The Apprentice, hiring and firing people. Today, he's asking for the American people to hire him. And what we're seeing is that, not everyone relates to the way he does things. And this is something that's always been spoken about the Trump supporters, whether it was through Hillary Clinton calling them a basket of deplorables, or recently President Biden saying, about Trump voters being trash. The things that have been said about Trump voters, what I'm seeing is what, depending on the community, and whichever community, whether it's the Hispanic community, which usually leans towards the Democrats, and as well as the Black community that has been a traditional, for the Democratic Party, where, they showed up for Obama, even at higher numbers for Obama than for Hillary Clinton and Biden. And when you look at those numbers, they have dropped when it comes to Kamala Harris. And that's something that we've seen recently with President Obama, campaigning for her. And he actually, this kind of made rounds on social media and TV, where, what the Black community felt, and specifically Black men felt, that he was talking down to them when he said that they're not showing up for Kamala Harris the same way they showed up for him, being Obama, and that maybe they have an issue with voting for a female candidate. And so that really took a turn. I would say, a lot of this campaign has been living on social media, how people are reacting to things, because no more now people listen to what's on TikTok and Instagram and their influencers on YouTube and X and whatnot. And so that was a pushback. It didn't go so well trying to be able to bring out that sort of voter base. We saw that increase happen, from the onset when Trump was indicted. He went through his court proceedings, and more people on the streets, when they were interviewed, they said, who do you support? And a lot of them said, you know what, now Trump, he's being treated by law enforcement the same way we've been treated, right, in this country. It's really different in terms of America, how race is still much of an issue here compared to Canada, being able to see on both sides how people feel. And so that is affecting different areas. Now, when it comes to what you just mentioned, when it comes to the Muslim community, we've had, many leaders in the Muslim community go on mainstream media, or even show up on Donald Trump rallies and say that the left has left them and now they're supporting him. Essentially, what are they looking for? What is the average American person looking for, regardless of race? They're looking for someone who's going to be tough on the international stage, who's going to be tough on the domestic stage. That's why, if you notice, Kamala Harris, when she started doing more of her branding, they made her tough district attorney in California who prosecuted gangs and, was tough on crime and all of that. Not so much about what she's done in the last 3.5 years, but more about her background in that. Whereas with Donald Trump, like you said, there is a history when it came to the trade agreements, when it comes to the tariffs, which, interestingly enough, the tariffs he did put into place with China, the Biden administration did keep. So they feel like, this is a guy who can't run another term if he wins, right? He's almost 80 years old. And he's going to have 4 years where he could do what he wants, right? He's not going to run for election. He did say if he loses tonight, he's not going to run for election. But if he does win, he's got 4 years. He's lived a really big life. And I think he wants to go down as a very consequential president. And so I think people feel like he is the guy who is going to do that. And interesting enough, Chris Cuomo, he said something about Trump voters that went viral on social media. And what, I'm just paraphrasing what he said, but it really strung a chord, which was, he described the Trump voters. He said, they may not act like him, they may not think like him, they may not speak like him because of, some of the inappropriate things that he says, but they want to hire him to do a dirty job. And they want someone who is that rough and tough to be put in such a place as Washington, D.C. to clean it up. And, the more Democrats I speak to, as well as independent voters, that's what they want. They want to hire, like, if you were in litigation, what kind of attorney do you want to hire? Do you want to hire someone who's nice, or do you want to hire someone who's going to be rough and tough? And this is what he's put out. That's been his brand for the longest time. That's how we know him for the last 4 decades, of the guy who says what he wants, does what he wants, and and what seems a very successful in business, in real estate, went from being a business guy out of New York City to becoming the president without, serving any term, in any position in government, essentially going in 2016, going to Washington, D.C., not being a political person. And so, he's been able to win at so many things, and Americans today want to win. They want to win when it comes to the American dream, to be able to afford stuff. They want to win when it comes to prosperity in the country. They want to win when it comes to trade. Essentially, it's the biggest GDP. We could argue that if he puts the tariffs, what does that mean? And has the empire fallen? Still, the world's biggest GDP. Everybody wants to sell into the United States, whether it's manufacturing for cars, whether it's garments, whatever the case is. People want to be, whether it's steel, lumber, all of that, which would affect Canada and in Mexico and other countries. They want to be here. This is the biggest market, and none of us here being Americans can say that we're not influenced by American culture. We are. Right, we are, when it comes to how they do news, how when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to the gadgets we use, right? Whether it's an Apple, whether you have an iPhone, whether you use Facebook, whether you use X, whether you use Instagram, all of this affects us. Do you use Uber? All of these are American companies that are a big part of our life. We rely on American technology. We rely on everything, really, when it comes to how much of it we consume. So it is a place where I don't think, deciding, even if Kamala Harris, a lot of people think if she wins tonight, that the country is going to go in the same direction it has the last 4 years. And that's the biggest concern. But regardless, if she is the president of the United States, the first female, the first Black Indian president of the United States, which is a very big deal, I think the country is still going to be at a place where it is going to do well. But we hope that for the people, the American people, when it comes to how divided they are, that they can come to a place of peace with each other in harmony, because that is what built the country so great. And that is, and we're all looking to see what that means, and who could, if there's another superpower. I don't know if it's going to be in our time, or in any near, time frame, but it is something to watch, definitely.
Okay, thank you for giving us all these details. I'll carry on the discussion, but since we're talking about ethnic votes, and very shortly we are going to talk about more numbers, I have a very interesting point to make for Robert. But before I go on to that, Robert, just for all the viewers from the South Asian community, Indians have been coming to US for more than 100 years now. And if I could see where the Indian community is heavily dominated, I'll definitely have to pick New York, New Jersey, California, Texas. These are the places. And in terms of cities, of course, it's New York and LA. And then you have Chicago. All these cities heavily dominated by the Indian population. 1957, that was the year from California, the first Indian US congressman was elected. Mr. Sondh, he was elected as a Democrat in 1957. And then, of course, it was Bobby Jindal from Louisiana as a Republican. But then Ymedia once again from California. And then we've had others as well from different states, from Illinois, from Washington, and from Kamala Harris also, she got elected as a senator, but again from California. And now we had Vivek Ramaswamy, very active, and he was asked this question, you say you're a Hindu, and Vivek Ramaswamy would say, yes, I'm a Hindu, and he wanted to get elected as the president. Talking about Indian diaspora, I'll also quickly want to mention, we've seen an Indian origin Prime Minister in England, Rishi Sunak. We've also seen many cabinet ministers across the globe in US. Nikki Haley was there, but we've seen many cabinet ministers in England. We've seen many cabinet ministers in Canada. We haven't seen an Indian origin prime minister other than England in terms of Rishi Sunak, but cabinet ministers in Canada. We've seen a premier, Ujjwal Dosanjh, also an attorney. He also was the attorney general there in British Columbia. Many mayors from Edmonton to Calgary, we have mayors from Indian origin as well. So the Indian Americans are closely watching, though there are not many. There are a handful of, I would say, Indian Americans who are trying to get back to the House or Senate. But would there be any prominent roles for them? We will see how it goes. We'll talk about that as well. But quickly, Robert, I want to come, and Ramonaji, I'll come back to you once again. But Robert, I want to come to you. I know you're going to say it's very early right now, but I'm watching Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, even Michigan for that matter. I'm watching these key states, and I think Kamala Harris is doing well. So in case she could win these states, it's going to be Christmas for Kamala Harris. Robert, what do you make of these states and other states? Georgia, I'm still looking from 4% to 9, 16. It's almost halfway mark as far as elections are concerned. Trump is still leading there in Georgia. Yeah, I want you to comment on all these states and any other states you want to go. Please, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think this election is now down to, I think we started this night talking about the swing states. North Carolina, the kind of the Sun Belt ones, the ones people describe as the Sun Belt. That's your North Carolina, your Georgia, your Arizona, and Nevada. All those tonight very clearly seem to be voting for Trump. You see it in Texas and Florida. Obviously, those are not the same states, but the swings you would see in those states are very similar to some of the swings you would see in some parts of those states. So, although obviously we're not saying that the results we see in Florida and Texas are going to be replicated in Georgia and North Carolina and Arizona, but I think those results are going to be the similar results that you see there. So, there will be some application of that. So, I kind of think at this point that Sun Belt path is completely narrowed. I think it's going to be Trump would win North Carolina, Trump would win Georgia, he'd probably win Arizona, and Nevada's going to be very, very close, but it kind of doesn't matter for what we're going to talk about in a second here, because the path now for Harris is you have to be perfect. You have to win Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. If you win those three and the Nebraska second, which I suspect she will be able to win, then that's it. Yeah, you got it. You got 270, 268. That's it. Done. Right? That's it. But you have to do that. So you have to be perfect. There is no margin for error now. If you do not win those three states, it's over. There is nothing. There's no coming back here. It's just done. So that's the line here. If she can win all three, and again, they are going to be very, very close. Although she has leads in them now, we are missing a lot of vote in rural counties. If she can sweep the board and win the Nebraska 2nd congressional district, which is in Nebraska and Maine, they give out votes by congressional district. If she's able to win those three states and the Nebraska 2nd, she has a path. But that Sun Belt path, that North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada path, that seems to be shrinking. And at that point, I'll point out quickly that if Trump were to win one of Michigan and Wisconsin and one of Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, Nevada doesn't matter because all those states are bigger than Nevada. She needs all three of those and the Nebraska 2nd to be able to win the presidential election. Nevada kind of doesn't matter at this point. So unless she sweeps if she sweeps all three, which she can, it's about 50-50 in all three of those. But again, it's like flip a coin 3 times. All three got to land on heads. People who flip the coin, we know how that works. We know how that probability works. If she can't get 3 straight heads in the next 5 hours or so, Trump's back.
that has become quite interesting, Robert. Okay, let's see how it goes. You're talking about 5 hours, I guess. I would say in about 3 hours from now. But yes, things are very interesting here. It's been a roller coaster ride for both the candidates. Robert, before I go to Quito and Pankaj once again, one quick question for you, Robert. During the middle of the election race, they changed the candidate. I know Joe Biden was trailing behind, but then you brought in Kamala and she started. The polling numbers went up for her. Do you think this was the right decision? I know this has been discussed many times, and also the legitimacy of that has also been discussed many times. But we've never discussed on TV or even off the air as well. So I want your take on these 2 points. So was this a right decision or not during the middle of the campaign? And she didn't win any primary. She didn't run a leadership contest, and here she is she lost in 2020 the race, but here she is as the presidential candidate for the Democrats. So there are many. I saw that on live TV debates. Many guests or even the anchors who want to shut down this debate, and there are others who definitely want to cushion this point. Both these questions, Robert, I want you to address.
I think you didn't have much choice. I think the options were either you go with Harris or you go with, like, I think it was kind of like with Biden, you like 100% lose. After that first presidential debate, there was very clear questions of, can this person be president not just for 4 more years, but till the end of the term? There was very clear questions about that. The White House had not been particularly clear about exactly Joe Biden's mental state. I guess clearly there had been aging. Age had always been a concern for Joe Biden, but I think very clearly there had been some mental decline there during the presidential term. And I think it's like immediately after that debate, you saw polls with Trump winning the popular vote by 3-4 points. Now, I expect Harris to get more votes than Trump tonight. I still do. It's going to be close, but I expect her to win the popular vote by maybe about 1 or 2 points, roughly. That being said, I think it's at that point, it's like if you think about what you could have gotten then, like what this would have looked like had Biden been, you would have had assured losses, right? I mean, looking at Virginia, it's not Harris is winning in Virginia. She's probably going to win Virginia, but at a like several point swing against her from compared to Biden in 2020. The Rust Belt states are going to be more competitive as well. Biden only lost Texas by 5. She's looking like she's going to lose Texas by 10 or so. Florida, Biden only lost it by 3. The state has shifted left, but Florida, it looks like it's shifted left since 2022, but not that much since 2022. This looks a lot more similar to 2022 than it does in things. So in all the Sun Belt states, these numbers look very, very rough for Harris. And I mean, could Biden have brought that back? Maybe, but at the same point, you can make a very clear argument that Biden would have done even worse than right now. So I think the argument is you had to do something. Was this the best option? No, I think there was probably better options for the Democratic Party to do, but because Joe Biden held on so late, and again, even after the debate, that debate was in June. He did not step aside until after the Republican convention in July. If in the days after that debate he had stepped aside, maybe we could have been having a different conversation right now. There could have been a very quick primary. You could have built a lot more enthusiasm, but because he took so late, basically everybody got in behind Harris, and that was it. And I think there's what we're seeing tonight in the data, and this is, I mean, obviously we're not having a Canadian election right now. We will have one probably relatively soon. The swing you're seeing and the anger in the electorate, I mean, obviously the U.S. is more partisan, so some people will just never vote for the other party and vice versa. But the magnitude of the anger in some of these electorates, some of these states in Virginia, right? This is a state that's a pretty safe state for Democrats. You're looking at halved margins compared to Biden. Like, you're looking at 5-point swings in some of these states. And Harris, even though Harris is expected to win the popular vote, you're looking at outside swings in some of these states. There's very clearly a lot of anger in this electorate. The polls are probably going to underestimate Trump yet again, not by as much as, obviously not as much as 2020, probably only by about a couple points. But still, though, there is a lot of anger in this U.S. electorate, and this is a backlash to the last 4 years, to inflation, and I think that's what we're seeing tonight. I think in my opinion, this was probably going to be debated over the next several months. Had Joe Biden been the nominee, this only could have gotten worse. This is the salvageable part.
Okay. Very, very interesting times. But I must tell you, we are going to get results very shortly for New York, Arizona, Colorado, and so many other states in few minutes. But before we do that, I want to ask each one of you, I'll start with you, Pankaji, then Ramona ji, and I'll go to Robert as well. We were all talking about US is still, the superpower. But let's talk about the geopolitical situations right now. Whoever becomes the president, first things first, how do we deal with the war in Ukraine? I know we've heard comments from Trump and Kamala Harris, but how do you deal with the war in Ukraine versus Russia? That's first thing. Second, you have a full-blown war in Middle East, Iran versus Hamas, Iran in Lebanon, Israel versus Lebanon, Israel versus Hamas, Israel versus Iran, so many other things going on there. So that's another issue. And more importantly, I want all you to touch upon very briefly, where do we see US as a superpower? We see the rise of China. We see India is on the horizon there. And if you look at the projections, China is all set to become the first country on this planet to be a $50 trillion economy. I want your take on this one. And then moving forward, I think China could be in the range of 60, 65 trillion. Then US could be second or third behind, or very close to India. India could be 55, 54 trillion. US could be a trillion more than India or a trillion less than India. And very interestingly, in the next, not too far from now, 20 years from now, there won't be any other country which will be even touching 20 trillion. So these three countries moving clearly ahead. China number one, 60 trillion, US 54, 55, India 53, 55, and then you won't have any country even touching $20 trillion. So that's going to happen in the next 20, 25 years. So where does US stand?
Just a joke. Nvidia might touch it, right? It's 3.5 trillion right now. So I don't know. It's joking, but yeah, these countries are growing. Basically, they are doing their work, and U.S. dominance will stay for little longer time. Still, I feel, but yeah. I agree.
Sorry, since you started on a lighter note, so I'm just tempted to reply there. So Ymedia, I saw the owner, and he's learned his ways. He knows how to do business in US, Europe, in China, with Xi Jinping, and of course he started calling, Ymedia, the owner, he started calling Modi ji.
Modi ji.
So he's learned his ways how to do business in US, Europe, and in India. Modi ji, go ahead. Sorry,
yeah,
that was
definitely. So he knows how to grow his company to.
Yeah.
3.4 trillion now.
Yeah.
Basically the biggest company in world. Anyway, so I 100% agree with you, because these countries are actually going that way, and their dominance will stay. It's I don't know how long they will be called developing countries. It depends on that, but still, like, US dominance, I cannot see going away in another 5, 7, 10 years, at least.
Probably even more.
Probably even more, because dollar is still it's a dominance, dominating.
Since you've touched, sorry to interrupt once again, there was a lot of discussion. I want you to quickly touch upon that. BRICS, de-dollarization, with they're starting their own currency.
I don't know when they will print it. So it's still, I cannot take it that China, India, and Russia can come on one page and do their things, because anybody wants, whenever everybody wants to control the currency, basically. It's not European Union. They will make one union and they will control the currency. Who will control the currency? China, India, Russia. Nobody will let them control. So what I feel here, they are going in that way. It might help them for some time, but there will be some dispute here, because China wants to become big and India wants to become big, and whose currency will dominance will show dominance on these kind of things, because they have to strengthen their rupee or their yuan to make that currency their dominance in that currency. So China or
a joint currency by BRICS, that's not possible. You don't see that happening anytime soon. Or the other thing, what they're doing right now, 90% of the trade between China and Russia, they're doing it in their own currency, ruble and yuan, and then Russia is also accepting Indian rupee, though.
So what they will do with that, actually? If Russia is accepting that rupee, yeah, India was smart enough to give them rupee and buy this oil or other things. Now, that rupee is sitting there. Now, they have to buy things from India only, nowhere else. So it's like the same thing. It's not a like dollar or any other currency where you can go anywhere and buy anything. So I don't see that's happening very soon. I don't agree on that point that anybody, China can leave their dominance and say, okay, India, you control the country, or India will say, okay, China, you control the currency, or let's make one team where that union that will control the currency. Then Modi ji will say, no, 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 I will control those people also there. Yeah. Because I want my whatever I want, that should happen. So that's why I don't think so. It's
you see more you see more trade wars happening if Trump comes to power, because he's been one of those fellows who still doesn't want to go on actual wars. I mean,
yes, that will happen.
Trade wars.
Trade wars will happen.
Will
happen because the way he's going, 10% tariff here, 10% there, and Europe, you should do that. China, I will put 50% on you. Yeah, of course, you are creating the trade wars. You are actually forcing Europe to trade directly with other countries than your country, basically. And you want to import. That's what his dominance might, whatever Trump will do, might hamper U.S. dominance for some time. But yes, I would say Trump can be very bad for U.S. also, for trade wars also. Jidvirji.
All right. And Ramanaji, what is your take on this one? And then I'll go to Robert. I know there are very crucial results coming. But Ramanaji, your take on the global dominance that US has enjoyed. I know this is one country. It has seen Imperial Germany, Imperial Japan, then Japan, today's Japan go down. England, for that matter, and USSR, not Russia, USSR imploding. So US has dominated all the way, and in this century, I know US will pull up some tricks to stay at the number one, and it's quite natural for anybody who's number two, number three, like China, India, Russia would want to bounce back. So where do you see all these challenges for anybody who takes charge of the White House, Ramonaji?
Yeah, numbers don't lie. I mean, what you've described in terms of breaking it down for the growth of India and China, those are real things. But at the end of the day, people still hesitate to do business in those countries. When you have the case with, for example, China, right? Most of the companies there are owned by the government. They're assets of the government. They're government owned corporations, and that's been a massive issue. In Canada, we had the case of the two Michaels who were imprisoned. So it's still, even though it's growing, and for the longest time we've imported Chinese products. But what is the branding of Chinese products, right? Do we trust Chinese products even though they're everywhere? But now they have the kind of brand that maybe it's not the highest quality, right? You think twice when something's imported from China if you're buying it versus somewhere else or domestic. So that's a case. And even India, it's you did say, yeah, it's still a developing country, even though it's opened up its borders and there's a lot of trade, and it's got great projections. But at the end of the day, how safe is someone going to India? And even though English is commonly spoken, but to be able to do business the way you do in the United States. The United States has been very stable and predictable. If you look at, we can talk about crime rate and immigration and, recently when it comes to inflation, but traditionally, there's a level of branding that American companies have, or if you go into the American market, even though it's 10 times bigger than the Canadian market, but there is still a level of, there's laws, right? There is predictability. There's a constitution. English is a spoken language. You can get around. For example, I drove through the country twice. Would I drive through the country in India or in China? Not so much. I've done business in the United States. I've also, worked with Chinese companies as well as Indian companies. I can tell you there's a massive difference in terms of the corporate culture as well, right? So I think there's still a lot of work to be done for it to compare to a developed nation like the United States, or even a developed nation like the UK. I've worked in the United Kingdom, and so it's a bit different in terms of predictability. Are you safe? Are the laws followed through? Is it a dictatorship? Is it not? What's the predictability? What is the geopolitical situation? What are the demographics? So this is all very key things to be mindful of. Now, when it comes to Trump and the tariffs he's talking about, the people here love it. They love the fact that, the reason the unions, Teamsters, have now endorsed him is because when he put the tariffs for steel, it saved a lot of jobs. Now he's talking about doing the tariffs for any manufacturer that wants to manufacture the vehicle outside of the United States, but import them. There were massive automobile manufacturing companies being built in Mexico by Chinese companies, and to be able to bring it across the border. And he said, you know what, I'm going to put 100%, 200% tariff. What does that mean? You can't come in, right? You can't even compete to be able to save the auto industry in Michigan. So he's been very strategic in the promises and the policies he's put forward in some of these key battleground states. And whereas you've had that missed opportunity on the Harris part, whereas, she said, when it comes to Pennsylvania, very big deal to be able to, we're seeing the numbers come in there. Was she for fracking? Was she not? It's a big part of the economy there. So some of these, it's interesting how she, flip-flopped on that, whereas Trump has been from day one, drill, baby, drill is his line. So, the American people love that. They want to be a superpower. They want to remain a superpower. So anybody who speaks that language to make sure that America is not only a free country, but a place where, regardless of, what your ethnicity is, regardless of, if there's no caste system, there's no, regardless of whether your family has a lineage, which is something that in the United Kingdom or in some of those other countries, the caste really does matter. Whereas in the United States, it's that American dream of, if you work hard enough, there's access to opportunities, whatever work you have, there's probably another 1,000 people behind you who's gladly able to do that work. But it's a place where everyone's come to be able to make a better opportunity for themselves. And this is what is on the fight for the ballot tonight. And that's where we're seeing most of the divisive talk on either sides about where this country's going to go. But it's going to be quite a ways, for America being the brand that it has, and how safe you feel being in America compared to China or India as a foreigner, to be able to invest, to be able to open up companies, to be able to grow the same way, and not, to understand culturally what's happening there, to understand all of those things where it's not the same thing in the United States. You just need really good capital and market research in the United States. You're not going to deal with the same issues in those in the United States that you would in those other countries.
Yeah. Pankaj, I'll quickly come to you before we take a very short break, and then we'll come back here after the short break, and then we'll carry on our discussion. Lots of key and crucial battlegrounds. We'll talk with Quito, we'll talk with Robert. But as Ramona ji was mentioning, just for viewers' benefit, we talked a lot about this. India is still a developing country, and many people say, yeah, it's an advanced country, but is it a developed country? No, absolutely not. It's going to take 20, 25, or maybe even 30 years. Other part is that one of the reasons when we talk about G7 and G20, G20 is a group where we have US, Canada, India, China, but these are all these countries who have strong economies. But G7, one of the prime reasons, G7 are rich countries. We don't even have China in G7. One of the primary reasons is per capita income. When we talk about G7, these are 12. Earlier it was G8. I still remember John Baird, even before we removed Russia, John Baird will start saying, John Baird used to start saying, G7. Anyways, so these are, the per capita income is very high. India, for that matter, South Korea's per capita income is higher than India. So I think the per capita income, as much as the economy is growing, will they have the trickle-down effect? That's the key question. But if we look at the projections, as we were mentioning earlier, US is getting richer, jobs are good in US, economy is strong, the businesses are making money, but an average American, and Robert was also mentioning the number one thing is inflation. We've heard Ramona ji also talk about the common American. So the challenges would keep on mounting for US from the common man's perspective. At the top of the pyramid, you could see a lot of wealth being accumulated with Ymedia and all those big companies that you follow the stocks. I don't follow the stocks that much. I just read in print. Go ahead.
See, these challenges will remain in every country.
Okay.
Not only in US. US population is what, 350, 400 million. So whatever category percentage they have, India will have more percentage of that kind of category where they will struggle. So I would not go that way, because if the population will increase, yes, those percentage will always increase. But remember one thing: you have taken Nvidia, you've taken Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Amazon. These are from here. These are US is dominating every big company or trade in the technology or in the world. So and for corporate people who like children studying from here, well educated, in these companies you start with $150,000 per starting salaries are like that. So I don't think that kind of situation will come. And if the situation will come for every country, not only for US.
And as you were mentioning, I agree, not only the big major companies, and US is all set for that kind of innovation, because US has set up those innovation hubs. I was looking at, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I was trying to study why MIT is such a sought after institute.
Yes.
And it's not just one institute, there are so many other institutes. You look at their budgets, you look at the professors, the academia, the professors. There are so many things that US still is way ahead of any other country. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Ramonaji was saying perfectly right, that thing where she has a very good point, that here you can grow in these countries. Like if you want to start with a startup only, you can grow. But those countries, you have to have some your hand or somebody's hand on your head to grow. Otherwise, you will be like taken away.
Some godfather.
Some godfather. You require a godfather.
You need
there.
a godfather there.
Yeah.
But India has one of the biggest. If you look at the unicorns, India has really done well in terms of that. And I agree to Ramonaji's point, and I share her concern, regarding safety. I mean, she just mentioned she was traveling to different parts of US, there's a very interesting piece in Globe and Mail that I read, and that was very similar to what Ramonaji were talking. She was mentioning how she traveled across US, and it's not about numbers. And the piece that I saw in Globe and Mail as well, very interesting, very similar article. This guy hops on a bus, and this guy would travel right across US. And then, but there was never a concern of safety for anyone. So he was talking to all the common Americans. It's a very interesting. He talks about so many different Americans in different states, right from New York to Nevada to Arizona to Texas. So this guy gives you a very inside view, because this is what I do in India elections. Many people ask me, touch wood, by the grace of God, our numbers are pretty accurate. Even last time our numbers were very accurate. So I said, I read articles by journalists who are on the ground there. I watch national channels of India. I read national newspapers as well. But more than the national newspapers, I also want to reach what's happening. And Ramonaji, and I don't remember that guy, but a very interesting piece in Globe and Mail where he mentioned how he would hop onto bus. He would travel for 4 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours, and then he will talk on the bus. Then he'll get off the bus. And there was a question as well for this guy, why on the bus? He said, that's where you connect with the common people, So I think safety is not much of an issue. I didn't hear even one person, challenge this. They spoke about crime, but they spoke about a host of other issues. But India and China, like Ramonaji just mentioned, would she feel safe enough traveling on a bus or on a train in India? No. We still have that. We still have that challenge.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, what do you say? Will that go away anytime soon?
No way. I don't think so. Yeah. It will increase.
It'll increase. Huh?
It'll increase. It won't go away because population is increasing, and we cannot control that kind of a mentality now. It's like mentality there. It's like we have to do these kind of things, and in US, Canada, or Europe, we don't have that kind of mentality. Children are grown like that, but in India, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a challenge. We have Robert back here. Before we take a very short break, the numbers are coming in. Robert, welcome back once again. I want to talk to Quito and Robert. Let's see where our numbers stand, and we want to keep you intrigued with what's going on. Robert, so what are the latest numbers, and what's your take on?
Yeah, I mean, since I've been on here now, Texas has been called. Trump does lead in Virginia, although very narrowly. I do expect that to come back. Fairfax County, a lot left in Fairfax County. That's kind of the deciding county there in Virginia. Trump now has a lead in North Carolina. Again, a lot of vote left to be counted there, but he does have the lead. Obviously, in Georgia, Trump does have a lead, and there is a significant amount of Fulton County in. There's Harris is up 300,000 to about 100,000, so it's a net 200,000, and that's nothing. Now there's a lot left to come in. Georgia will still be close. Trump was not going to win that by the 5-ish, 6-ish points he's winning it by now, but again, based on the swing we're seeing in some of these suburbs in the South, specifically in Texas, specifically in Florida, it's really hard to see a path to victory when you're getting that kind of swing against them. Pennsylvania is holding for now. Michigan is holding as well, but again, a lot of rural vote left to come in on those, and especially the rural vote we have. For example, if you look in and around Pittsburgh in the western part of Pennsylvania, in Allegheny County, Harris leads there. That's good, but she's also winning a couple of counties in outer Pittsburgh, and those are not she's not expected to win those. That's based off of strong early vote numbers for the Democrats. It is very possible that those will flip before the night is over. So the thing is, although yes, the vote looks really good for her right now, there are a lot of problems potentially in Pennsylvania. So this is not decided yet. Again, Pennsylvania is a coin flip. Michigan is a coin flip. Wisconsin is a coin flip. But the Sun Belt looks a lot rougher. Those southern swing states look a lot rougher for Harris than they did just a few hours ago.
Yeah, and you're talking about Pennsylvania, but you see North Dakota, South Dakota, Trump is winning all those, and you see this North Carolina. I think I know it's just 39% right now the vote count, but still he's at around 4-point or 5-point lead there as well. So Trump, I think I wasn't expecting when we will be covering this, Trump will be in a good position like this. Were you expecting this, Robert?
I mean, according to our modeling, we did have Trump as favorites in North Carolina and in Georgia and in Arizona. Smaller favorites than he currently is, and that vote will come back in as the cities vote more, but that's roughly what we were expecting. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, we were expecting very tied races in those. I think we will still see those. Those are far from done. She's leading in those. And again, if she leads those and wins all those, then that's it, right? It's game over. She wins that, and the Nebraska second, she's the president. That's the line, and she can still do that. She is very much in line for that. She can very much have that. But at this point, based on what we're seeing globally, the swing we're seeing globally in these suburbs and in inner cities and in the South, those don't exist in a vacuum. Those swings apply to other parts of the country as well. Although not directly, but the same swings you see in those counties will also be applied in those Midwestern states as well, to some degree. The question is just to how much degree, but it's very clear now that in those southern states, specifically with minority voters, Trump has made massive inroads with Hispanic voters in the U.S. And I mean, although it may not necessarily have that much of an impact in, say, Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, those ones are too early to call. But at this point, that path for Harris is just completely down to those 3 states. That's it. If she doesn't win those 3 states, Trump's the president.
Trump's the president. I think our newspaper, Midweek newspaper, is ready to go for print, and I think we'll have to put this because my journey as a journalist started with print, and I'm always looking for crisp headlines. Trump's the president. Well, let's see how it goes. It's still early to call. I still remember, you know what? In 2016, we were all here, and we thought in 2012 everything was over by 9-10 p.m. and we thought 2016 would go the same way. So it was 10 p.m., 11, 12. 1 a.m. in the morning.
I remember I went around 1 a.m. from here, and you were still sitting.
We were still sitting here. You left at 1 a.m. in the morning, and we had an editorial meeting, and none of the networks would call. And at 1:45 a.m. in the morning, so we thought, you know what, Hillary's already gone to bed. She won't come back from her hotel, and then let's declare it. The next president of US is Sir Donald J. Trump.
So but it was 2016. We are not declaring right
no,
now.
no. That was 2016. Yeah. Then 2020. We know, it was Democrats, blue, in a very quick time. Joe Biden, did that. But I think the early numbers indicate. This is again my viewpoint. I think I'm still waiting for Pennsylvania. I'm still waiting for a few other states, North Carolina. It's a little bit early, but I wouldn't have hoped Trump doing this strong. One of the things I want to go back to Ramona ji and then to Robert and Kutu and others. I want to ask you, Ramona ji. I've heard one of the TV hosts, mentioning a comment that was quite interesting for me. He says, even the wives wouldn't tell their husbands that we are not voting for Trump this time. and we're talking about poll surveys and exit polls here. So if the wife is not telling her husband that I'm not voting for Trump this time, so how would you really expect the numbers to be accurate? Ramona ji, your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's been circulating for quite some time. And even recently there was an ad done about don't tell your husband more, from the Kamala Harris campaign about how you're going to vote. And that is an issue, the gender gap in this election in terms of, how Donald Trump's doing really well with men and versus Kamala's doing very well, Harris is doing very well with women. Now, what does that mean at the end of the day? Because of the divide and how a lot of people have said, they can't talk about who they're voting for at the dinner table, with family members and in workplaces because it is going to erupt. Even some people have gone on the record to say that they've lost friendships or not talking to certain family members based on who they're going to vote for. And it's massive ideological issues in terms of the people here believe that if you are going to support Trump, your ideologies are completely separate from mine. Or, if you're going to vote for Kamala Harris, it's going to be completely separate. Now, there are people who will vote for Kamala Harris, regardless of if they think she is a great candidate for the Democratic ticket or not, because it's just the anti-Trump vote. Regardless, they would vote for anyone. So it's a, those people you can't sway. It's all the Democrats who feel like she hasn't really come up with a plan that works or fits for them in terms of the policies that she's put out, and they compare how they've been living now the last 3.5 years compared to Trump's time, may secretly go vote for him and not mention it or not go put it on their social media. And then there's of course there's the Republican voters, and then there's the Donald Trump voters, right? That's still a little bit different. It's still Donald Trump's party. It's not the same Republican Party that, was there before him. It's the independents that, majority of the campaigns are looking for. If you deal with any of the local campaigns, they'll say, do you have access to independent voters? How do you reach them? How do you make sure which way they're going to sway? Here in the United States, people are registered Democratic voters or registered Republican voters and registered independents. So this is a key thing. That's why they're able to tell from advanced polls, who voted. Now, that's the other issue. Advanced polls usually have the Democratic voters come out and vote early. And usually on election day like today, you have the Republican voters come out. Whereas it's been seen that the Democratic voters didn't show up for Kamala Harris in the advanced polls. So that's been something that her campaign has been really worried about, in this cycle. But in terms of keeping, what they say is, at a dinner table, don't talk about religion or politics. That seems to be the case here in the United States, that it is a very contentious issue. Now, I don't think that issue is going to end tonight when we know who the president's going to be. This is something that we're going to see which side erupts. How the people will go to the streets. A lot of people say, the United States is on the brink of a civil war. Now, is that going to be the case based on who wins tonight? That's to be seen, but obviously it's not going to end here. It's not going to end now. To your point earlier, you said, how come the mainstream media haven't endorsed what they usually would endorse in terms of, the Democratic candidate or whatnot? A lot of them are worried. They look at Trump as, somebody who is going to get back at them, right? He did say he's going to hold a lot of people accountable. So as people are seeing the numbers come in, some of them, even CNN was saying certain stuff about Kamala Harris, putting on 2 different ads one in Michigan, one in Pennsylvania, one for Muslim voters, the other one for Jewish voters, and it was CNN that called her out on it. So you're seeing already things shift. You had early on this election campaign, Meta owner, I forget his name, Facebook owner. He did say, he's like,
Mark
in the last
Zuckerberg.
election, Mark Zuckerberg, yes, he did say in the last election that Facebook did cover a lot of the Biden laptop situation, and this time he came out to the forefront. In this election, you saw, Elon Musk go all the way out for Trump and really go hard against the Democrats. So it's a very divided scene in that sense, where a lot of people are weighing in, and the ones that are kind of staying silent, they're afraid of the repercussions of what may come based on who wins. And same thing comes down to, women and men perhaps not saying to each other how they're going to vote. Hopefully that's not the case. If, it's a husband and wife, hopefully they do share who they're going to vote, even if they have different views on that.
Yeah, very good points. Actually, these are the things you learn on the ground. Mark Zuckerberg, I doubt he learned all these things. He's a Harvard graduate, I guess. He was in Harvard, So if I can recall it correctly, I know there was a movie as well, Social Network. I saw this movie. Anyways, so the point that you were making, I couldn't agree more. LA Times, both LA Times and Washington Post, they were about to endorse Kamala Harris. That's the exact point when they pulled back. Of course, I would say, you can talk about ethical reasons, but 10 days, 11 days before the election, you're coming up. The point is right. We do it here at Ymedia too, and I've always questioned why a media house would endorse any candidate or any party for that matter. But few days before, everyone knows you've done more harm than good. I know that their editors left. So many people at Washington Post left the job. You're not endorsing. And your 250,000 subscribers are leaving, you're not endorsing, because that's what you've been doing all this time. So I think if you would have raised this question maybe a couple of years ago, when the results wasn't playing on your mind, then of course people would have agreed. And everyone knows Amazon is his number one business, and then Blue Air, you have the aerospace business, and then obviously Washington Post. It's not that much of a priority as Amazon is. But you're right, as Ramona, you were mentioning, for business and obvious reasons, we know they don't want to be on the wrong side of Donald Trump. And look, here we are today. And especially when you have a competitor in the space business, Elon Musk, openly supporting Donald Trump. You want to say something, I guess? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there is cancel culture has been real, right, in the United States for quite some time. So on the back end of the cancel culture, where people have lost contracts, right? Celebrities lost contracts, or businesses lost revenue for which way they come out on certain issues. And sometimes it's been said, well, if you're a business and you sell to everybody, maybe don't weigh in on some of these key issues or what's trending or all those issues. But at the end of the day, it's people are worried. They don't want to lose their base. And even though you had Kamala Harris show up on, for example, Call Her Daddy podcast, she lost a lot of subscribers, and that goes to show maybe she didn't know who her base is, her audience, which way they lean. And some of the other podcasts that Donald Trump showed up on, they lost some of their subscribers too at the end of the day. So now it comes down to, are you going to be somebody like Elon Musk and put your support behind a candidate, a political party, and say what falls wherever the chips fall, they may, and do it that way? Or are you going to be someone who's going to stay on the sidelines, like a business like Amazon in this case, and say, hey, we have massive market share and we don't want to hurt our core business by actively endorsing someone who we think is going to lose. So that's what you're seeing. You saw that happen with Mark Zuckerberg, where he kind of pulled to the side and said, we did this in the last election. We were strong armed. Now, a lot of people wondered, why did he come up with that information early on? And Trump had said, I find that there was election interference in the 2020 election, then, people will be held accountable. So perhaps it was his opportunity to say, hey, this is what I did. I rather confess than be found out. that's to be determined after tonight. But it is that landscape of, where do you stand, and should you stand strong or should you stay silent? And, we're going to see what that means. And that's the surprising part, what we've seen with CNN now, saying certain stuff about Kamala Harris, like, pointing out how she's flip-flopped. And usually you wouldn't hear that from CNN. So is it that, they want to make sure that the ad dollars come in? But, if you look at the Canada, it's the same thing. Like CBC supports the Liberal Party, right? They're usually, there's, did you recall in 2019 election when Justin Trudeau had the picture of blackface come out, right? It made rounds and a lot of people said a lot of things, but imagine if in that election Andrew Scheer had blackface, right? What would the media say? So is there a double standard when it comes to how the media responds to each side? Like, like we talked about the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, it was covered, and right after that, the first time, Biden did say, maybe we should slow on the rhetoric that, that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. And, the active shooter, perhaps does, shouldn't want to be a hero because they're trying to protect democracy, because that's what the left is saying. They slowed it down for about a week, and then it went back up again. And second, assassination attempt, even though he wasn't shot at, didn't really get that much coverage because the media is like, well, he was caught and he didn't get shot at. So, there is a double standard when it comes to that. That's why you're seeing these candidates go outside of the mainstream media, which has really held court for a long time. Like, how often have you seen a presidential candidate say they're not going to do a 60-minute interview, right? This is something that every presidential candidate, regardless of the party, sits down for 60 minutes. And this time Donald Trump said, no, you guys owe me an apology. So you're seeing things that you've never seen before, a break from status quo and how things are done. And I think, we're going to see the results of that.
Yeah, and 2 points quickly. One, I was just watching Fairfax, as much as Fairfax is popular in the Indian community for two reasons. We have Mr. Prem Vatsa, who owns Fairfax. He's called the Warren Buffett of Canada. Yeah. So he's one of the big guys, Fairfax. But Fairfax is also popular for other reasons. Why? I was just watching Fairfax. It's a city in Virginia, and a lot of Indian community lives there. And very high net worth individuals live there, because I was just plotting all those cities. Just for our viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you that we would be launching more aggressively in US very shortly. We are already, our presence is there. We get a lot of calls, and I was making, jotting down the numbers. We get most of our calls are from New York, New Jersey, California, Texas. But I was also noting down all those cities from where there's a lot of South Asian or Indian population, and Fairfax is one of them. I was just watching the numbers for Fairfax and a lot of Indian community. But what I see is traditionally the Indian community has been supporting Democrats, and now they're making a switch. And that's happening with the Arab community too. I was watching, they're saying, they haven't supported us in the war against Israel, so let it be Trump. If it comes down to Trump, let it be. So that all that is also under play. But now to the point that we were discussing regarding media or endorsements or all this. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to say something on endorsement.
Sure.
Why Musk came to endorse, because he knows how to play with the gallery.
Okay.
Basically, he can talk, he can pursue people. Whatever he did with Tesla, we can see that.
Yeah.
And he knows nothing will happen to him, and he can talk it out and finish it, because he's more popular than anybody else. Like, he can talk.
Yeah, and also he bought this for almost 44 billion. At that time, they were saying Twitter, the market valuation was somewhere around 24 or 26 billion, and now I've learned it's less than 15 billion.
Yeah. 12, 13, I think.
12 to 13 billion. That's what the market valuation has come down to.
Yeah.
So he's having all sorts of challenges in Tesla, in the space area, and also in the media. So, but I don't know whether he'll be.
But he can talk and bring the share up, so that's what he does.
Do you think he's going to get a cabinet rank if Trump comes to power?
Oh, that I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Ramana, what do you think?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So essentially, Elon Musk has gone on the record. I've listened to every interview all these candidates have done on mainstream and off mainstream, and essentially, Elon Musk has also said that he's worried. If I put all my eggs in one basket. He's like, if Trump doesn't win, he's worried. He's like, am I going to go to jail? What's going to happen? Because this has been unprecedented when what's happened to Donald Trump in this election. As soon as he said he was going to run, then all the charges came through, and it's been something that's been different when it comes to American democracy. So Elon Musk knows that there's a lot at risk. The fact that he's openly, he even came out with the whole thing about registering somebody to vote in the swing states if they can register to vote. He ran a whole thing on giving out $1 million a day for these last few days. So he projected about $47 million just for to get out the vote in swing states, and that was been openly. He announced the contest, he put it out there, so he's really gone hard. And this is the scary part, and about what the outcome could be. But Trump did say that when he did an interview on X with Elon Musk, and that was a game changer for the amount of views he got for that. He said that he's going to bring Elon Musk to reduce bureaucracy. So wherever there is massive spending in the government that shouldn't be there, Elon Musk, what did he do when he bought Twitter and turned into X? He fired 80% of the staff, and and still was very profitable. So they know that he's the guy. If he can come in as a business owner, this is what the American people want. And I think now, not just the American people, but I think in other countries, in Canada and elsewhere, is that they want a leader who's run a business, who's been successful, who knows how to earn, right? Not someone who's just been a career politician and who's been on a salary that's been fixed at inflation, because that is what some of these people have been at when they work for government, and they lose touch. Because imagine when you're an elected official and you have your key staff people that say yes, 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 you have a lot of yes people, and you're in your bubble, whether it's in Ottawa, whether it's in Washington D.C., you really lose sight and touch with like what's really going on with the average person in the private sector. You kill what you eat. You don't just get paid. You're not on some salary like that you would be, whether if you're on the bureaucratic side. So I think most people want to have somebody who knows how to earn a living. Donald Trump has been very successful in his field in the private sector. He's built the skyline. He's been number one in his deal making. He's killed it in a few things, not only just in business and through real estate, but also media for the last 3 decades. And then now you have him in politics, going from a private person to becoming the president of the United States. Even Reagan served as 2 terms as senator, not just jumping from an actor to president. So he's done things that other people have not yet accomplished. And if anyone's looking for someone to get them on the right track to make sure this United States is the country that is admired across the world, it's a place where people want to have a green card. It's a place where people would thrive. They believe if they can come there, they could thrive, have the American dream. I mean, tell me what person doesn't want to have a successful business in the United States and have access to, the $1 trillion market? Who doesn't want that? And so this is why, you have someone who's doing well. And that scene, actually, the one he just pulled up, that was a game changer for him. That was right after the first debate he had with Biden. Biden did poorly, and even though Biden said he's not going to, step down, you had that shooting incident, and and you had him getting shot at, and then putting up his fist and saying, "Fight, fight, fight." A lot of people, including Mark Zuckerberg, who was a Democratic voter, his social media platform, YouTube, the rest of them have been very key heavy for the Democratic side. He even said, he's like, I've never seen anything like that before. So that already was like the difference between, yes, both men are old, but it was the difference between who's weak, who's strong, right? It was clear as daylight. That image will go in history of him, doing the fist pump after getting shot with blood across his face and saying, fight, fight, fight. That goes down in history. Now, I think you did mention this earlier about, Kamala Harris. They didn't have a choice, right? She came in, she's the VP pick. And when it came at that late in the game, Biden had raised so much funds, but it was the Biden Harris funds, right? So if you were to have primaries, which was no time to have primaries, nobody else could raise the amount of money that the Biden-Harris campaign had raised. So it was very easy to switch it out because her name was on the amount of money that came in, and she even raised more money because it was, you had a fresh new candidate. Now, a lot of things that her campaign did wrong was they hid her for the longest time. Now, mind you, maybe they thought it was a good idea because she's not very good when it comes to easy interviews, right? There's the whole concept of her having a word salad, right? Being able to say a bunch of things that don't really mean really anything, and that gets a little bit confusing, and her sticking to her lines. But and whereas when you saw her on the debate, she was excellent. She did really well. But then it also came out that her campaign had the upper hand with that ABC interview. So there's a lot of this thing that now people now mistrust perhaps the media, mistrust what's being put out there, and now are going to some of the off media to be able to figure out what's really going on. But if at the end of the day everybody's looking at their pocketbook, how much money they have, how much money they don't have, how much they're in debt, what is the projection looking like for the end of the year, for next year, and he seems to be the guy, because of his proven track record in his own personal life and because of his proven track record as president already for a term. It seems like even people who disagree with him with the things he says, they're like, well, he's proven, whereas she has now still been unproven, even though she's been vice president. And the term that went around in the media, in the US media for the longest time, was they said, for the last 16 years, 12 of those years were under Democratic presidents. And Trump was only the Republican for the 4 years. So they're saying anything you guys blame on him, well, you got to look at the track record of the 16 years, because it's very easy to say, oh, because of Trump or because of Trump. So there's been a lot of pushback in those things. So it's been very interesting listening to it and to see which way it sways.
Yeah, very good points. And I think I have a few points to add to that, and I'm sure Pankaj also wants to add that, but I want to quickly bring on, these are very interesting analysis that we're having, but I want to quickly bring back the focus once again. Robert, if I can bring you back in once again. I'm not going to tweet something right now, or I'm not writing a headline, but if I were to tweet right now or put a headline, what's going on, guys? What's going on? Who's winning? So, Robert, if I were to tweet, I will definitely say this. As much as my main state is still Pennsylvania, I want to focus on Pennsylvania. That's my number one state. But I also started on Georgia. If Trump keeps Georgia, Trump keeps North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Kamala Harris, she definitely has to pick Pennsylvania. So that's my tweet, that's my headline. I want your analysis. That's the current situation right now.
No, 100%, right? If she does not win Pennsylvania, it's over, right? And you can even expand that a little bit more too. If she doesn't win Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, I think it's over, right? 100% Pennsylvania though, and I think of all of them, that was kind of one that was expected to be the closest of those three states. So Pennsylvania is kind of the decider right there. But yeah, I think this is going to be very, very close in those states. I think looking at it, it seems like, again, you can't make a call on this because there's still a lot of votes left in Atlanta, in Raleigh, obviously nothing in Arizona yet. But just looking at the map, looking at how some of these other counties and other states are filling in, when you kind of project that, it does not look good for Harris in those states. But Pennsylvania, she is still winning in Pennsylvania. She's looking pretty good in Pennsylvania. There is vote in a lot of these counties. There's still a lot of vote left in her counties that she is expected to win. So Pennsylvania is definitely not done. But that being said, though, for her to win this, she has to defy the trends that we're seeing across the country in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Can she do it? Sure, right? She 100% can. But we're at a point now where it's like, if you don't, it's over, right? So there is still a path, and the path is, it's Pennsylvania. If she wins Pennsylvania, she probably wins the presidency. If she doesn't, she's definitely not winning the presidency. So that's the line, and I think Pennsylvania is still the thing that matters. That's what we said coming into tonight. That's where we're at now, and I think that has not changed. That has not changed at all. But again, the big story for me, at least at this point, is that it very much seems like that path to 270 for Harris has considerably narrowed. It is now down to those 3 states, and if she does not win those, then it's over. But again, she still can win them. It is very possible, but that's it. She has to win those 3 states. If not, then Trump's going to be the president.
Yeah, you're right. You're talking about Michigan. She's doing pretty well there. You're right. It's still possible. She pulls Pennsylvania. She gets Michigan. It's still possible. But as we were mentioning earlier, Michigan, Georgia will keep our eyes on all these. But once again, Georgia, Trump has been holding on to that lead right from the start, and now the numbers are quite strong for him. I think how many we have 60 or 70% votes already, and so Georgia, I think it's going Trump's way. It looks like that right now. So Pennsylvania, we're calling it a swing state, but right at the start of today's discussion, instead of swing state, I said Pennsylvania as the bellwether state, and now I think I'll term Pennsylvania as the decider. I think it'll all boil down to that state. If at all, I think she's still doing okay there. But if at all she loses Pennsylvania, I think it'll be very, very difficult to be over. But I think we got to take a very short break here. We haven't taken a single break, but we'll take a very short break here, and we have a lot of results coming in about 20 minutes or so. So we still have enough time. So stay tuned with Ymedia. We will carry on this coverage, but we have to take a very short break. We will have Robert with us. We have Arvindji with us, and Arvindji hasn't got a chance. He's asked a very interesting question. What was that? Elon Musk for president?
Yes.
Okay.
He's basically going. He's seeing the Trump, how Trump is winning.
Okay.
So that's his like.
Okay, yeah. So Arvindji is saying if once Trump's term is over, then Elon Musk is eyeing the seat of a president. We'll ask Ramona ji. She earlier mentioned that yes, I think she's following Elon Musk. So we'll ask her. We'll ask what Robert has to say. But 2028, the interesting part of 2028 is why I'm very interested in 2028. We have Olympics in 2028, and we have elections in 2028. So we all should be ready for 2028. But we'll talk more of 2024 after this short break. Can Elon Musk be the president? Arvindji will answer your query too. And there are so many other questions still unanswered. But we'll come back with Robert, with Quito, with Ramona ji, with Pankaj ji, and Arvindji, and of course, your host, Yudhvir Jaswal, as a group editor of Ymedia. We'll carry on this discussion after a very